Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre. Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern. Madame le député Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Tadier. Monsieur le député Luce.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé. Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Madame le député Lehegara. Monsieur le député Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alps.
Présente.
Madame le député Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Gorse.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Farney.
Présent.
Madame le député Moore. Monsieur le député Mezek. Monsieur le député Ozef.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Coles.
Présent.
Madame le député Poré. Monsieur le député Ward. Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Renouf. Madame le député Curtis. Madame le député Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le député Binet.
Présente.
Madame le député Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le député Miller.
Présente.
Madame le député Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet. Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Curtis. Madame le député Ward.
Présente.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Andrews.
Madame le greffier.
Prions Dieu. Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui établit le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton Saint-Nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute la délibération étant accompagnée de ta bénédiction, réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple qui de plus de commettra le soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant, Notre
Père,
qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite en la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous induis point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car toi la reine, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Défaut.
Monsieur le député Southern.
Présent.
Le ministre connétable de Saint-Jean.
Oh, sorry. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Apologies. Madame le député Dublé.
Deputy Dublé has a medical appointment this morning and asks if she could be excused afterwards.
Disagree? Yes, défaut excusé.
Madame le député Moore. Madame le député Poré.
Sir, Deputy Poré is still away. She could be marked excusée, please.
Oh, this is for the same reason as yesterday.
Yes,
and
sir.
the Assembly agreed yesterday, so excusé.
Monsieur le député Binet.
Il est malade.
Vous jurez que Monsieur le député Binet est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le député Curtis.
Sorry, Deputy Curtis also at a medical appointment this morning, and asked if you can mark excuse till he arrives.
Excusez. Les états sont constitués. Members not familiar with the excusé protocol, generally speaking, if someone provides a reasonable explanation why the member isn't present, then they're marked excusé. It's technically correct that that should only happen after the Assembly agrees, but I take the view by looking around and nobody standing up wishing to object that tacitly that the Assembly is agreeing. So I hope that explains the process to people as we go. Chief Minister, your office asked for permission to deliver a statement. Are you ready to deliver a statement? Has that been circularised to
I
members?
believe so now, sir. Thank you.
Can we just check that that's happened? We've just received the email. It's not been formatted nor circularised to members. I will be minded, given the urgency of the matter which relates to the flooding, that we would let the Chief Minister deliver the statement at this point without it being circularised, and it will be circularised as soon as possible. Is there any objection to? Thank you very much, Chief Minister. Please do.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the GREF for allowing me to give this statement to Ireland, to the Assembly. Like other islanders, I was shocked by the speed and the severity of the flooding experienced in Grand-Vaux and in various locations across the island yesterday. Only over 2 months of average rainfall was recorded in the days leading up to Monday, which escalated as reservoirs and pumping stations struggled to cope. The impact of such extreme rain has particularly impacted residents living in the upper sections of Grand-Vaux who were evacuated from their homes by Jersey Fire and Rescue Service and by Andium Homes. The Council of Ministers met after yesterday's sitting. The island's emergency services and departments across government who plan and prepare for such eventualities briefed us that yesterday those plans were quickly actioned to provide urgent support to those affected. The government received 140 calls around drainage issues and 41 call-outs were made to unblock the systems. From early yesterday morning, the Fire and Rescue Service and members of the Infrastructure, Housing and Environment Department, along with Jersey Water, had been on site supporting affected residents and staff at Grand-Vaux School to evacuate and assist with the management of flood waters. The flooding began with some staff and children already at the school, and colleagues from across the Education and Children Department made sure that everyone's welfare was looked after. During the day and into the night, the emergency services were directly advising and supporting residents to evacuate flooded areas and at-risk sections of the upper Grand-Vaux area because of the ongoing danger from the floodwaters. They made door-to-door evacuation calls in the area starting from Grand-Vaux School and running along Grand-Vaux to Troy Court. Some residents who were asked to leave their properties initially went to St Saviour's Parish Hall, where immediate shelter, advice, hot food and support were available. I want to thank the constable and staff at St Saviour's Parish Hall, as well as the volunteers from Beresford Street Kitchen who provided the emergency reception centre. Affected residents who were told by emergency services that they should evacuate were encouraged to stay with friends and family overnight and for the short term if necessary. Andium secured sufficient rooms for their residents in the at-risk area, and further hotel rooms were made available as backup for non-Andium residents. In total, over 58 households have been evacuated, and my thanks go to those hotels and guest houses who provided emergency accommodation for those who've been displaced by the flood. Andim Homes will be contacting residents early this morning to provide an update on the situation and outline when they hope they'll be able to return home. The government helpline, which was managed by the communications team who stepped in late last night, is being staffed by CLS today, and it's available to assist any affected islanders on 448844. Gronvo School was closed due to floodwater preventing access to the school, and it will remain closed again today. Although it thankfully hasn't been flooded, it is not accessible. The Jersey Youth Service Centre will also remain closed today. The head teacher has been at the school today, and thankfully it would appear that there are no major structural issues and a reopening plan is underway. That will be agreed with staff and then communicated to parents in the coming day or days. The department is liaising directly with parents, and they will be the first to hear of any plans. I want to reassure members that those affected by the flooding that we will continue to provide support, including emergency accommodation and financial support over the coming days as they return to their homes and manage the impact. The immediate priority has been to protect the lives and safety of those at highest risk from the impacts of flooding and making sure that they have shelter and accommodation. We've been addressing the need for immediate financial assistance and will be putting in a form of immediate financial support comparable with that incident, and further details will be announced today. So I want to offer my profound thanks to all those emergency services staff, government staff and the team at Jersey Water and volunteers who acted so quickly. They acted so quickly to manage this incident and support the residents of Gronvo, and I'm happy, sir, to take any questions from members.
Thank you very much, Chief Minister. There now follows a period of 15 minutes initially in which questions can be asked about matters arising out of the statement. Deputy Farnham, you were originally going to ask an urgent oral question, so I'll give you the first question before moving on to others. If you wish.
Thank you, sir, and can I thank the Chief Minister for updating the Assembly and indeed recognise the work done by the government yesterday to ramp up the communications, especially to those impacted. I know it was appreciated. I think it's well known that Gronvo is a high flood risk area. What modelling can now be done to ensure this, if we can ensure this doesn't happen again, or we can ensure that any future problems will be alleviated by being perhaps a little bit more prepared? I understand the main problem was caused by overflow from the reservoir, and Jersey Waterworks reacted to start moving water to other reservoirs. But the question is, what modelling can be done to help prevent this sort of thing happening in that area? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for his question. As the Deputy may recall, some modelling was done a number of years ago, and this plan has been in place for a number of years, as this has been identified as an area of risk. Although the level of rainfall, as I outlined in the statement, has been quite extraordinary and something that is not seen in a decade. This is a 1 in 20 or maybe even 30-year event, and therefore it is quite an extraordinary event and one that is simply about an accumulation of water. But thankfully, yesterday, just at the point that it stopped raining, and over the period where the majority of water was flowing down into the valley from runoff, it just so happened that the tide was also starting to go out, and so we saw a very rapid reduction in the water in that area, which shows exactly how nature can sometimes work at its very best. And so we are hopeful that, given the limited amount of rainfall expected over the next day, then water should subside and the clean-up operation can begin.
Supplemental there?
Thank you, sir. And can I thank the Chief Minister for her answer, sir? And just, I'm sure she is aware that this is not a problem just that is happening in Gronvo, but across the island there are issues. In St Mons, for example, I know of at least 2 homes that have been flooded by waterlogged fields, which is causing the water table to rise. What help is available to islanders in other parts of the island who are having problems such as these? Who should they contact, and what can be done to help them? Thank you.
Thank you. So yesterday, people were being directed not to the police, but to the infrastructure department, who I believe are coordinating these efforts. I can ensure that that number is clearly shared with the public who may need to use it. But for example, as I came into work this morning, I saw that the road at Tesson Mill is still closed. And of course, the Honorary Police Force will have been out there supporting infrastructure and the fire and rescue service in their works around the island, because this has really put a lot of strain on our infrastructure and its capacity to cope with this amount of water. But as I say, hopefully the rain will abate today and we will see that water dissipating and flowing out to sea.
Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to kind of follow the question of Deputy Farnham, because I've been yesterday at the coordination center at San Xavier Parish Hall, and the residents that were evacuated there were raising actually concerns that they were, back in 2017-2018 flooded, they were raising these issues, and even a few days ago, residents that have seen the reservoir almost overflowing, they raised it with Jersey Water, being worried that this could happen. They also raised along these years problems with the drainage network in the valley. Has this been recorded? Has this been looked at to have a proper infrastructure network put in place and try to mitigate this? And if hasn't, can they be assured that going forward this will be looked into, sorted, and to avoid further things like that?
Thank you for sharing that information with me, Deputy. I have had brief preliminary discussions with Jersey Water about the management of the reservoir, which they assured me was perfectly normal for this time of year. We do have a plan, as I outlined earlier, but of course it is becoming very evident that as our population, in particular around the town area, but around the island, has increased, there is perhaps now a need to look at capacity issues in our underground infrastructure, as well as that which we see above ground. And I think that this is now an area of real focus for the Infrastructure Minister and the Council of Ministers. And we will be looking at what needs to be done as quickly as we can.
Supplemental, Deputy Kovac.
Yes, thank you. You said that measures of support will be further announced, but also residents from private accommodation that has been affected were asking if somehow someone can contact landlords and go into those properties that were affected to make sure that are still safe to be lived in before they actually go back. Can that be assured?
Well, I'm very much aware that Andium have been doing a fantastic job once again in ensuring that their residents are well looked after and their information is provided. It is, of course, a difficult area at the moment to get around. Some drain covers have been removed, and although now I believe that there's less standing water, the area will have to be carefully entered into, and I imagine that the emergency services will be able to support people who need to, but we may need to give them a little extra time at this point, so before people can freely go back into their homes. But it will certainly be an environmental health matter, that decision. If floodwater has gone into a home, I'm afraid it is likely to be a matter of time before people can once again live in those homes, because the clean-up operation will have to be done first.
Sorry, just a point of clarification.
No, there is no point of clarification in the question period.
Oh, okay. Because
We are quite tight on time, even with an extended period.
No, it's just for the private.
Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. May I ask the Minister what consideration will be given, or will support be given to those who perhaps don't have contents insurance? Because particularly at times the cost of living crisis is one of the first things to go. I just wondered if the Minister can give some assurances for people who may be in that situation. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, this is a matter that is on our minds, and we absolutely think of those people who may be in that position. Of course, this is extremely early days, and whilst we have committed to providing some financial assistance, we will, of course, need to understand what the quantum is of that, but we're most certainly focused on being able to do what we can to support residents. But in these early stages, it's a little too early to give exact specifications.
Supplemental, Deputy?
Yes, please. Thank the Chief Minister for her answer. Can I ask as well, one of the issues that is, we've come across a great deal in St Helier is that Andium Homes often give loans for carpets and don't carpet homes. There may be some residents who are in the situation where they've now lost those carpets and are paying a loan. Will some action be taken to help those individuals? And I'll take this opportunity as well to urge that that system doesn't happen anymore anyway, because I don't think it's the right thing to do. But in this situation in particular, where people may be paying for those. Thank you, sir.
Well, I think there's a very valid point to raise, and I'm grateful to the Deputy for doing so. I will ensure that that's part of our discussions with Andium going forward.
Well, Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. So in due course, it would be helpful to know what the split is between private tenants, homeowners and Andium tenants. And I know that a lot of focus has been on Andium tenants at the moment, quite rightly, and one feels sorry, I think, in particular for Andium and what they're going through, as well as their tenants there. My question relates to a potential disparity between private tenants and Andium tenants. Whilst this is a difficult period for all of them, Andium tenants know that they will at least be rehoused by their landlords. There's nothing in the law that requires a private landlord to rehouse a tenant. There's nothing that requires a private landlord to have insurance that covers the eventuality of fire or floods, which renders a property or a home uninhabitable. And indeed, under the residential tenancy law, all that's required under Article 9 is for the tenant to stop paying rent for a period where the property is uninhabitable. This is something I've raised with the previous government, sir, and is it something that the Chief Minister, along with the Housing Minister, will be sensitive to in the rehousing of tenants, both in the short term to resolve any loopholes here, but also to make sure that the law is made more robust for these kind of eventualities in the future?
That was a wide-ranging but pertinent question, sir, and of course it identifies some short, medium and long-term actions. The long-term will be the legislation, and I'm very happy to discuss that with the Housing Minister, as I'm sure the Deputy will endeavour to do so also. In the short term, let's remember that this is an emergency response to a major incident, and therefore we're very grateful to those hoteliers and guest house owners who have helped us provide homes to those people who've been affected and evacuated from their homes overnight. And we will look to ensure that everybody is as well looked after as we can in the coming days.
And so thank you, sir. Would the Chief Minister consider a mechanism for those in private tenancies who are not being rehoused or offered rehousing by their landlords access to legal aid, irrespective of whether they would normally qualify, if they need it, or some form of legal advice other than citizens' advice that they may need in order to find suitable accommodation from the person of whom they're renting?
I think it's better that we take a case-by-case situation, and we will need to quickly quantify where any issues may lie. But I would expect that the majority of landlords would have the relevant insurance in place, and they will be good landlords and undertake their duties to their tenants.
Deputy Barbara Ward, did you wish to ask a question? I may have written Deputy Ron Ward down twice, if you see what I mean, sir. No, thank you very much. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. When Gronvo used to be in my old constituency in 2017, I attended down there when there were floods at that time, which were described as 1 in 100 year floods. And shortly after that, a flood plan was put in place. And that plan said that the plan ought to be updated again in 2021. Could the Chief Minister inform us whether that update did happen, and if so, what it included?
I am not aware of the update, but of course I wasn't in government in 2021, and that is a matter for the previous government and any subsequent actions that they may or may not have taken.
Supplemental.
Thank you, sir. Last night I attempted to find evidence of an update of it and couldn't find any. So once the immediate need has been resolved from this, could the Chief Minister give her assurances to the Assembly that if that plan is now out of date, it being clear that it may well be, given that what was called a 1 in 100 year flood turned out to be a 1 in 5 year flood, that plan will be updated as soon as possible so that our island is well prepared in the future for these kind of eventualities.
Thank you. And as I said, the Infrastructure Minister is most certainly focused at the moment on matters below ground and capacity issues that we are experiencing around the island.
Well, that brings us to the end of the first 15 minutes. A number of people still wish to ask questions. May I assume there's one opportunity to extend by, there's one opportunity to extend by 15 minutes under standing orders. Can I assume that that's proposed and seconded and passed? Yes. Very well. Yes. We'll extend by a further 15 minutes. Deputy Hull.
Thank you, sir. And I wish to say thank you to everyone who's been helping with this. But it's been brought, a follow-up from what everybody else has said, it's been brought to my attention that it's not just household contents that people haven't got insured. I think some people do not have household insurance for their homes. And I just wondered if the government may consider encouraging islanders to take out insurance, so that, because I think we're going to have more, sadly, more of these things with the extreme weather and our climate. And I just wondered what you might think. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy for the question, and householders are of course encouraged to take out insurance for both their buildings and contents, and that goes to whether they are owner-occupiers, landlords or tenants. We all have duties and responsibilities as members of our community to take such relevant action, and of course we hope that those who are able to afford to do so. In future, perhaps as a government, we can look to extending such methods to islanders who may struggle with the affordability of such vital parts of their household.
Supplemental, Deputy. Honourable Saviour.
Thank you, sir. And may I add my congratulations to the emergency services, sir, who did an exemplary job. And I thank the Chief Minister for her kind words regarding the parish of St Saviour's staff, many of whom went home after their workday finished, got changed, and immediately came back to the parish hall and worked until 10 o'clock. I'd also like to thank Andium, who don't always get good reports. They did an exemplary job. Many of them were in Gronvo all day, absolutely soaking wet, looking after people, and working from St Saviour's Parish Hall to relocate everyone they could to...
I appreciate the sensitivities of the moment, but actually you've not asked a question yet, and there are lots of people who have questions to ask.
Very good, sir, indeed. Members are aware, sir, that I've had experience in floods in Tewkesbury, which was a 1 in 100 year event, and it's happened, I think, 13 times since. So Mother Nature wins. The real work begins now with the clean-up, and as has been said, with the repairs of the housing. Does the Minister not agree?
Minister?
Sir, sorry, I lost the thread at the end. Could the Deputy repeat that part?
Do you not agree that real work begins now in preparation for such events in the future?
I think, sir, I've outlined that already this morning. We are focused on issues below ground and most certainly.
Did you have a supplemental at all? No. Go on to St Helier.
Thank you, sir. Does the Chief Minister endorse the Infrastructure Minister's pledge to put Granvaux, and I quote, front and centre of infrastructure improvements? And does she further recognise the vital role played by the Cavan in making sure that the flooding was not worse, particularly given the amount of political fallout that was created when the Cavan was created, and now clearly it's fulfilling its use? Thank you, sir.
I thank the Constable for his question, and I think I was reflecting just yesterday on that issue of the Cavan. It is sometimes really difficult as a politician to take some decisions, and some at the time will particularly receive flack and intense heat, which will sometimes cause politicians to question why they do the job that they do. But yes, sir, yesterday I was thanking those people who bore the brunt of that decision, because it has to be said that the Cavan was full yesterday morning early, and that was showing exactly how and why it was built and delivered, and it did exactly what it was intended to do. And to answer the first part of the Constable's question, sir, of course, I would agree with the Infrastructure Minister, and he has not only my support, but that of the rest of the Council of Ministers in undertaking the work he has ahead of him.
Yes, it's perhaps a minor point, but in the statement, the Chief Minister didn't refer to the honorary police, although she did subsequently refer to them. And would she join with me in giving thanks once again to the honorary police, some of whom are still helping in Pier Road in the aftermath of the tragedy there in December, that they were out again yesterday from not only St Helier but other parishes, and will she join me in thanking the honorary police? Thank you, sir.
So the Honorary Police are one of the finest examples of why Jersey, as a small community, responds so amazingly well in times of crisis. And I'm exceptionally grateful to every person who gives up their time voluntarily to support their community and sometimes undertake the unglamorous work that the Honorary Police do. And we simply wouldn't function as an island as we do without them, and I thank them wholeheartedly.
Deputy Ows, if you indicated a desire to ask a question, and I noted your name down, but of course, holding a ministerial office, it wouldn't normally be open to you to ask a question of the Chief Minister when other members who don't have direct access have questions to ask.
My actually question was exactly what the Constable Snelly was doing about the parishes, about the Honorary Police, because I visited that last night, so it's been asked.
Thank you. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. And a very brief thanks and sympathy to those who have been affected by this. But other members have mentioned, and we should be aware about climate scientists saying that extreme weather events will actually probably increase flooding in lots of areas. And I personally am aware of areas where the water table already is low, such as Goose Green in my area. So. And there are other areas next to reservoirs. So I just wondered when the Chief Minister said that underground infrastructure will be looked at, bearing in mind the link to density of housing in different areas, whether she could give the assurance that this is something that's not going to just be focused on one particular area, such as Grand Lavaux, that showed this emergency it's created, but all areas across the island.
Thank you, Deputy, for the question. I think members of the Planning Committee in particular will be aware that water resource issues are very much becoming a feature of planning decisions, and this is something that we are most certainly focused upon. I will not interject too much on matters that I know the Environment Minister is fully seized upon, but we are most certainly focused on the impact of changes in our environment and how we as an island need to stand ready and prepare for them.
Supplemental, Deputy Scott?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Conor St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. The first sentence of the Chief Minister's statement refers to her shock by the speed and severity of the flooding experienced in Granvaux, and I can only join with her to endorse that. My sister called me at about 6:45 yesterday morning to show me the flood water outside of her home. And it rose during the day, and she was traumatized and in shock. She has been rehomed for the night, and again I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Fire and Rescue Service who took her from her home in one of their ribs. She never thought she would leave her home by boat, but that is what was the reality yesterday. And my question to the Chief Minister, sir, is whether counselling will be provided, if necessary, to those who have suffered trauma and shock. It was shocking. She is still in shock this morning. And on a more practical issue, will Andiam Homes be providing their tenants with sandbags for possible future events such as this? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And I think as an island, we've become so aware of the issues of shock and the need to access counselling and quickly during the difficult weeks that we have experienced in the past month. So, just as we did last month, I'm sure that we can ensure that the Listening Lounge is most certainly available to those residents who may need to talk that through and to come to terms with what has happened, because I can completely understand that it was a terrible shock to watch those events unfold and be so unsure of what was going to happen next. All I can say is to reassure islanders that how very fortunate we are to have the emergency services who were there and showed their preparedness and their ability to deal with the situation as it transpired. One thing that they did say to me yesterday was that it was one of those situations that looked as if it was manageable and okay, but then all of a sudden it moved into the not okay situation. And I think that we should all be mightily proud of them all.
Supplemental comment?
Yes, I just remind the Chief Minister of the second part of my question, which was whether she would recommend to Andiam that they provide their tenants with sandbags for possible future events such as this.
The Constable is quite right, of course, and that sandbags were an issue that we were questioning yesterday, and we will ensure that those are provided to all residents who should need them.
Deputy Felton.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me. I have been contacted today by one of the affected residents in the area, and as Deputy Tadier mentioned earlier, there are a number of people that are living in private rentals and obviously homeowners as well in the area. We have heard about the advice and support that has been made available to Andiam residents, but my understanding is that those that are in private rentals and perhaps homeowners as well are feeling that the advice hasn't been given to them on such a practical level. Will the Chief Minister commit to providing practical advice for both private tenants, private landlords and homeowners about the steps that they should be taking at this point in time, and the help and support and potentially financial support I heard her mention earlier that will be available to them?
Most certainly, sir. Last night, our communications team stayed in the office until extremely late to man the call centre. We set up a phone line immediately and communicated that to people. And I'm really grateful to the team who did that. Today, we have got the COVID helpline going again, and that's now a free phone number for islanders who do need help and support, whatever their circumstances. That is available to them, and that is what I would urge them to do if they need help or support or advice.
Supplemental, Deputy Felton.
Yes, thank you. Has the COVID helpline, have the staff already been given that practical advice in order to give out to people, or are they at this moment in time still just taking people's contact details?
I was aware that just as already last night, the essential information had been provided to those people who were answering the telephone so that they could provide some level of advice. Of course, there will be technical questions that they may not be able to answer immediately. And I would always urge people who do not have the exact correct advice to take someone's details and to get back to them with the correct advice rather than giving them advice that may not be correct. But there certainly is information at hand to those who are answering the phone lines this morning.
Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. The Chief Minister appears to have ample planning in place to mitigate this sort of event. Will she assure the House and that she will return to the House to the Assembly with a plan to prevent an reoccurrence of this sort of thing?
As I think I've outlined earlier, sir, the Infrastructure Minister is fully cited and focused on this at the moment. And I think this will probably be a matter that will come back to this Assembly in the coming months so that we ensure that as an island we are properly able to deal with capacity issues in our infrastructure.
Could the Chief Minister firm up on possibly?
I'm not sure I said possibly on that occasion, sir. I'm pretty... Sir, I think I said that the infrastructure is fully focused on this matter at the moment, and he... Okay, got you. Yes, sir, okay. So he will, I have no doubt, be coming to the Assembly in the near future to ask for their views.
What to do? Time for one further question. Conor St John.
The Constable St Peter's, sorry.
Well, that's quite an easy matter to deal with. Defo is raised on the Constable of St Peter. Possibly time for a very quick question. Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. We know that extreme weather events are going to be occurring more often. We know that Granvaux and Town Mills area sits at the bottom of our largest valley, which starts on the north coast up at Les Plateaux. We know at times of high tide events and the cabin being full that there's an ongoing risk. Does the Chief Minister accept that due to the topography of the island, that at times like yesterday, water in Jersey in those areas just has nowhere to go?
Sir, I think the Deputy's description is exceptionally accurate, and we were extremely fortunate yesterday that as I said, just as the rain stopped, the tide was falling, and that was a very fortunate set of events.
Very much, Chief Minister. That brings the second question section and final question section to a close, and we now move on with public business. The debate therefore resumes on reinstatement of senators, P108. We are now debating the main proposition. And I have next listed to speak Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. As one of the members who worked tirelessly on the last electoral reform proposals alongside the previous PPC chair, Deputy Russell Labby, before becoming the PPC chair myself for the last 15 months of the last term, I want to make new members aware and remind previous members that that process and those proposals was not something that was done lightly. It took about 3 years and a whole array of different proposals, calculations and consultations. As well as the parish roadshows which have been previously mentioned, focus groups with the public were also conducted by a professional body, the results of which were shared in the accompanying report to the proposals. And we liaised numerous times with members before we were able to get something over the line. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the previous PPC Chair, Deputy Russell Labby, for his efforts, passion and knowledge, and most of all, the support and guidance he gave me in the last term. Although the loss of the island-wide mandate was definitely not the most talked about thing on the doorstep during my election campaign, it did come up a few times. And when it did come up, I asked the question, well, why do you want the island-wide mandate back? Many of the reasons were similar to the ones that have already been mentioned in this debate, but the issue is that many of these reasons are actually based on inaccurate information or misunderstandings. For example, the misunderstanding that being able to cast fewer votes makes the system less democratic, the number of votes versus equity argument. We have never had a more equitable voting system in Jersey, ever. During our consultation period, the public favoured equity of voter representation over number of votes cast, as did members when it came to voting on one of this in the first iterations that we proposed. The Constable of St Mary yesterday mentioned that voters wanted to have a say into those who end up in high office roles. Voting for the senators does not achieve this. The Assembly decides who becomes Chief Minister, and all the ministers, not the public. Although it has been convention that the Chief Minister candidates came from the senatorial benches, this has never been written into standing orders, and anyone from the deputies or the constable benches could contest this role, as happens for the ministerial posts, because the Assembly makes the final decision. In fact, this was something that the Democratic Accountability and Governance Subcommittee, chaired by the previous Senator Vawa and Deputy Gorse was a member of, included in their report at the end of last term as a key finding and put forward a recommendation. That finding was, number 6, accountability of the role of Chief Minister within the public arena is lacking as voters do not have a say on who should be elected to the role. The recommendation was voters should be provided with the opportunity to indicate their preferred candidate for Chief Minister during the voting process. This is something that could have been implemented in the election, along with a number of other recommendations in that report, but we simply didn't have the time to do it. Now we've made the system simpler and more equitable. The main thing for me that was missing from the last election was the work from my Political Awareness and Education Subcommittee that we had planned to roll out. Why was this work not rolled out fully? COVID happened. We had a number of members with great ideas, and I'd like to thank those members for being part of that subcommittee last term, and the new members who have joined this team this term. But it was extremely unfortunate that work essentially came to a complete halt due to COVID. I would also like to highlight the fact that we have a newly constituted and fantastic team in the GREF that didn't exist before, the Digital and Public Engagement team, who are dedicated and have the resources to implement our ideas and to engage and raise awareness in the public. Previously, we only had one person working on this, our now greffier, who did a fantastic job but had limited resources and time. Now we have a whole team who haven't really been able to release their full potential or carry out the work they wanted to, again, because of COVID restrictions in the run-up to the elections. So I think this just highlights and shows again the importance of what many have said about giving time for this system to bed in. We need to increase voter turnout, there's no doubt about that. Changing the system again will not help. If anything, it will do the opposite. It will cost more time, money and resources to go backwards as a number of work streams are already in train. Time, resources and money that will be better spent looking into ways of getting voters out now that we have a much more equitable and slightly simpler system. Things such as a centralised voter register, for example, something which just this week the Consumer Council has put out a call for, as I'm sure we're all aware, many islanders are facing difficulty applying for credit cards, and this would prevent further credit card companies from pulling out of Jersey. An automatic voter registration system, no more wiping of the registers and having to fill in forms every year. Exploring different voting methods such as preferential voting, as well as more accessible and mobile polling stations, amongst other things. So, sir, although I commend Deputy Gorst for not turning his back on his electorate and standing by one of his election promises, which is something we should all be doing, I cannot support this and I would urge members to vote against it. Thank you, sir.
Right, Deputy, does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Renniff.
Sir, thank you. Back in 2012, my father sent me an email when I was living in London. It referenced an article in the JP saying that an electoral commission was being set up in Jersey, and in addition to on-island membership, the aim was to appoint a member with a Jersey background who lived offshore. My curiosity was piqued, and I applied. And I ended up as a member of that commission that was chaired by Deputy Balash. In that capacity, I first attended this chamber, sitting in the gallery above us. not quite as impressive a record of attendance as the chair of PPCs. And in fact, involvement in that electoral commission set in train a course of events that eventually led, via a fairly circuitous route, to my election to this assembly. Deputy Balash may still be rueing his inadvertent role in setting that chain of events in motion. Since then, I have made interventions in the debate over electoral reform, and if those interventions have taught me anything, it is the need for humility. There have been times when I was sure that I absolutely understood the public mood, and other times when I was absolutely sure that mighty moral principles were at stake. I cannot now say that my certainties were justified. So I therefore come to this debate with humility, I hope. And I have to say that this proposition does not display humility. This proposition is based on an assumption. It assumes that alone of all the questions and uncertainties that surround the question of electoral reform, one question is already settled with absolute certainty, namely that the senators should return to the Assembly. Islanders want a return of the island-wide mandate, Deputy Gorse said in his speech, without qualification. That is an attempt to assert that the island-wide mandate is a settled question, to which all other questions of electoral reform should defer. So that question is not settled. It is not settled. Let us examine the claim more closely. Deputy Gorst asserts that his constituents in the fair parishes of St. Juan, St. Peter and St. Mary were overwhelmingly in favour of the return of the island-wide mandate. Perhaps the ones he spoke to were, but perhaps not. So we are all subject to a singular psychological failing. It's called confirmation bias. As a cyclist and a driver, I am convinced that the traffic lights always turn against me just as I'm arriving at a junction. Every time it happens, my theory is confirmed. The trouble is, I don't really count the times it doesn't happen. They don't register because I'm not primed to notice them. I only notice that which confirms my theory. It is striking that many of those who claim that there was overwhelming support for the return of the senators are, in many cases, those who have always believed that the senators should be in this assembly. It is fair to argue that they may well only be paying full attention when they find evidence to back up their point of view. Confirmation bias. So I accept that there is overwhelming evidence that those who support the return of the senators found overwhelming evidence to back up their case. That does not constitute an objective case in support of the proposition. But let us assume for a moment that Deputy Gorst is right. Out west, most people he spoke to were for the return of the island-wide mandate. What about those he did not speak to? What of other districts? What of St. Helier and other urban areas where the proposer of this proposition did no canvassing at all? The removal of the senators meant that previously underrepresented areas were able to achieve greater representation than in the past. The great win of the current system is that it achieves much fairer representation. That's partly because the new districts are better designed to reflect voter representation. But there's another reason why there is better representation through the present system than with the island-wide mandate. An island-wide mandate disadvantages areas with low turnout. If you have one big constituency where you know that the greatest turnout is in the countryside, that is a bias against the low turnout areas. Now, maybe there are those for whom this sounds like a good idea. I'm not one of them. It is not a more democratic system to bias your electoral system against low turnout areas. Can the supporters of this proposition be sure that all those voters who would be disadvantaged by the return of the island-wide mandate will be happy with that? And what of the couple I met whilst out canvassing in St. Brillard, who told me that they had refused to vote since the referendum on electoral reform in 2013 because of the betrayal of the State's Assembly in refusing to implement that referendum result? Let us remember, as many people have pointed out, that 80% of voters in that referendum chose options that removed the senators from the Assembly. I know that it is fashionable amongst those who support the return of the senators to try and rubbish that referendum. And I don't blame them, because it's a pretty powerful piece of evidence. However much people try and rubbish it, the fact is that if people were desperate to keep the senators above all else, they had the option in that referendum. But people did not support the return of the senators on their they did not support keeping the senators as their first and overwhelming priority. Deputy Gorst makes other claims. The office of senator is the most democratic of all the elected offices that have existed in Jersey's electoral history. This is a myth. It is simply not true, for the simple reason that there is no single way of measuring the quantum of democracy encapsulated in each class of states member. It depends entirely how you define democracy. I understand that it is good propaganda, but it isn't true. The reality is much more complex, as democratic systems tend to be. For example, if you stand for election in an island-wide mandate, you will need to spend a lot more money than in a district or parish election. It provides a barrier for entry based on income or wealth. That will restrict the number of people able to stand. Is that more democratic? Another point. An island-wide election gives greater weight to existing politicians. Name recognition. It is easier for a new politician to make a mark locally in the electoral districts than in an island-wide election. Is the greater weight to name recognition that is implicit in an island-wide mandate more democratic or less? It depends on what you prioritise. Another claim. The existence of senators gave every islander a greater direct influence over the makeup of their state's assembly and, albeit more indirectly, their government. Several members have argued that the reduction in the number of votes you cast is a reduction in your democratic power. But as Deputy Alves has just said, this isn't true. It's a beguiling claim, but not correct. In crude terms, the correct way to phrase this is that having lots of senators elected on an island-wide mandate gives every islander a smaller say in electing more people. It is not more power. Smaller districts may mean that you vote for fewer representatives, but you have a greater say in electing them. So another consideration here is that if this proposition was accepted, it places a very particular lock on any electoral reform proposals for the next 4 years, 3.5. When a lock as strong as this was proposed in the past regarding the role of the constables, it was put to the public in a referendum. That was a recognition that placing such a significant restraint on what the Assembly, and in particular PPC, may even consider as part of its deliberations is a matter of great gravity. There's one more point to make, and it concerns turnout. The point about bedding in, which many people have used, isn't just an abstract point. It reflects something important, namely that electoral turnouts tend to be a lagging indicator. People vote on their past experience. They were cynical leading into this election. I think we all recognise that. Certainly the overwhelming feeling I got on the doorstep. Many people didn't want to vote, they were so disenchanted. Now they will have seen that elections can lead to change. Let's see how that plays out at the next election. So, of course, I don't want to say there are no advantages to an island-wide mandate. Of course there are. But there are also negatives. So in this assembly, we champion the principle of evidence-based decision-making, or at least I hope we do. There is simply no objective evidence to support the basic assumption behind this proposition, namely that the island has come to a settled view on the question of the island-wide mandate. In fact, I would say even if you support the return of the senators, you can still vote against this proposition. There will be plenty of time to consider this question when we have all the information we need at our disposal. Let us canvass public opinion in a structured and comprehensive fashion. As the chair of PPC has eloquently argued, let us give PPC the freedom to approach this with a blank sheet of paper. In other words, start with evidence, not anecdote. Let us integrate the question of the possible return of the senators with an understanding of how it might affect voter bias. Let us understand what has been gained with the current system, as well as what might have been lost. Let us remember that we spent more than 10 years trying to change the previous system because it was so widely considered to have failed. Let us show some humility. Let us admit that we do not know the will of the public on this issue. Let us investigate the issue properly, in full, without preconditions, able to investigate all the complex interlocking ways in which different factors of electoral reform play off against each other. Let us trust PPC to do their job. There's no need for this proposition now. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Stevens.
Thank you, sir. And I could just stand up and say, hear, hear. But having spent many, many years sat up in the public gallery and now finally having the opportunity to say something myself, I'm going to take that opportunity. Also, I do feel quite strongly as obviously Deputy Gorst, but also Deputy Farnham, who's mentioned within the proposition, talk a lot about what people in my constituency said during the campaign. Actually, I feel it's my duty to say something as well. So it's human nature that we don't like change. We like what we know, appreciate patterns, routine and stability, and often resist and sometimes even fear change. And with that in mind, the new electoral system was always going to be a subject of conversation ahead and during the election. And a bit like the story of Deputy Tadier's dad's beard, we notice change and we're very quick to comment on it. And so such reactions during a time of change can be amplified. Now, I respect Deputy Gorst a great deal and have spent many, many of those years sat up there listening to him talk and during his time in government. And I certainly, as others have said, don't criticise him for bringing a proposition to the Assembly which seeks to fulfil one of his election commitments to voters. But what I do take issue with are some of the arguments being used to try to advance this proposition. An argument based on principle is one thing, but that's not what we're seeing here. In his report, Deputy Gorst says that both he and Deputy Farnham referred to bringing back senators in their speeches at all three hustings and asked the public to vote for them as a means of bringing back senators. I also made my position on this subject clear during the hustings, that I wasn't in favour of another electoral reform so soon, and specifically that I wouldn't support the return of senators in this way. I was elected second in that poll, 30 or so votes ahead of Deputy Gorst and more ahead of Deputy Farnham. Should we take that as evidence that no change should be made? Or as evidence of a split of view in the constituency? The reasons that people voted for us are to do with many reasons, and they're about more than simply whether we supported the reinstatement of senators or not. And rightly so. The fact that Deputies Gorst and Farnham were re-elected is not evidence that a majority of the public want senators returned. In fact, as we've heard repeatedly, there's no clear evidence that islanders as a whole want the return of the island-wide mandate at all. Yet we're being told, and I've heard others members repeat it during speeches this week, that this is what the public want. Now, conversations on doorsteps of the kind conducted during the campaign are a type of evidence and a valuable form of engagement, but they're not the entire story. I knocked on many hundreds of doors myself and do like to reflect on those conversations in this Assembly from time to time. But we cannot base policy just on a few conversations on doorsteps. And as we've heard from other members, evidence about the public's views on electoral reform does exist, although perhaps it's not the type of evidence which would support this proposition. I can recall one email that's arrived in my inbox, and it was sent to all States members, lobbying on this proposition. Just one. And one example of where I'm particularly uncomfortable with this sweeping state claim that this is what people want is around those islanders who don't actually feel strongly about the shape that the political system itself takes, and so don't choose to go out of their way to talk about it. those who didn't collar Deputy Gorse or Deputy Farnham on this subject because it simply wasn't on their agenda? Are we only taking into account the views of those who are engaged in the details of the electoral system or prioritised it in their conversations on their doorsteps, if they happen to be in that day, that is? Also more complex than the issues before us today are our challenges as an island with low voter turnout and civic engagement. And I'd go as far as to say that the way the State's Assembly has approached electoral reform in the past, not least the failure to enact the results of the referendum on reform, has made those challenges worse. The way to build trust and enhance engagement is not, in my view, about how we are elected, but what we do individually and collectively once we are. And that's the way that it should be. I'd also like to ask Deputy Gorse, so I'm in no doubt, because I think his report alludes to this, can he confirm that it's his view that ministers should only be elected from the senatorial benches? And would he consider, under a system with 3 classes, that senators have a greater right than deputies or constables to be part of the government and to lead it? His report certainly suggests so, and I can see he's gently nodding over there. In which case, can he confirm when he was a deputy, that he was a deputy when he was appointed Social Security Minister? And was he less effective than your senatorial colleagues as a result? I'll leave the comments to come from Deputy Gorse in his summing up. But moving on to one of the main concerns I do have with this proposition, there are others, but others have covered them in detail. But I would just like to take a moment to talk again about diversity. Because let's not forget, as others have said, that we do sit here today as the most diverse States Assembly in history. It's not a coincidence that a new system helped to contribute to that increased diversity. It was one of the arguments for change in the system, and we've now got the evidence that it has been successful. More women than ever before were elected on the 22nd of June. We had a 50% rise in female representation, so that today we've got 21 female states members out of a total of 49. In the previous term, there'd been 14 female politicians. Prior to that, 12. Yesterday, Deputy Labby seemed to refer to incremental progress in this area. But I would argue this was a major jump. In my own constituency, one of the 3 parishes had never had a female representative. It's now got 2. We also have a more diverse assembly in many other ways, not just in terms of gender, and I strongly believe that diversity around the decision-making table leads to better outcomes. Again, there's a number of contributing factors which led to this increase in diversity, but the new system is one of them. As others have said, more diverse candidates were encouraged to stand or felt able to stand because of the changes to the system. I'm one of them. Challenging an incumbent single deputy in a country parish, if you haven't served in the honorary police, is a daunting prospect. So too would it be to challenge former chief ministers, bailiffs even, on an island-wide platform. I'd also have been daunted by the potential cost that can come with senatorial elections. We should not take the diversity of today's assembly for granted. It still feels fragile, and this proposition could be a risk to that. And that's just one of the reasons I can't support it. I'm a member of PPC, and I want to see the committee spending its time over the next 3.5 years continuing to work on the development of our political system and the support around it, which aids diversity, improves openness, transparency and accountability, and builds trust deeper and more broadly than just because someone can vote on an island-wide basis rather than in constituencies. No one is, as far as I'm aware, claiming that the current system has in any way failed and needs urgently reviewing, and there's no evidence that there is overwhelming public interest in the return of senators. I cannot therefore sensibly and rationally vote to fundamentally change a system which was introduced democratically, which has delivered the most diverse assembly in history, and before even a single year, let alone term, has been completed. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. And I'm only going to make one speech in this debate because regardless of the amendments and other things that people have said, this is just fundamentally about the return of senators. We've heard a number of very good speeches on both sides, some actually excellent speeches against this proposition, but some have tried to lead us down a path to confuse us slightly. But this is not about if senators come back, whether they have deputies or constables or either of those two offices are removed. This is just about the return of senators. I accept, sir, that different people in different parts of the island campaigned before the last election, and they may well have different views to mine. They may well have spoken to parishioners who expressed different opinions. But I was so relieved when Deputy Labby got up to speak yesterday, because I was starting to wonder if I was in some sort of parallel universe where things started and happened differently. Because when I knocked on the doors of St Martin and Grouville earlier last year, there was overwhelmingly one subject that people wanted to talk about, above hospitals, above healthcare services, surprisingly in some instances. But I got berated continually about the loss of senators. Sir, the chairman of PPC said in her speech that she wants to make sure that parishioners are not ignored. And Senator Osif told us that he wanted to do what the people who put us here want us to do. So I, sir, have to say to members of this assembly, I'm going to do what my parishioners want. I'm not going to ignore them. I'm going to do what they want me to do, and I'm going to vote in favour of this to return the senators and to work out the detail later. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I have the results of the 2013 referendum in front of me, and I think Deputy Luce will find that a majority of parishioners in both Grouville and St Martin voted for the electoral system we currently have in that referendum. So the point I'm going to come back to at several points in my remarks here is that I'm sorry, but anecdote is simply not as good as empirical data. And I really hope that the proponents of this proposition can start to understand that. So in June 2018, when I was sworn into office after that election in the Royal Court, I chose to take the affirmation rather than the oath, and so I was taken into office as senator after the other 7 senators, which means I think I have the right, and hopefully will maintain the right, to have etched onto my gravestone one day, here lies Sam Mezek, the last senator. Because I hope to never see a return of that office, because the entire existence of that office never made any sense. It made no sense when the British Home Office recommended it for Jersey, and it made no sense in 2018 when the last elections took place there, because it simply doesn't offer this assembly anything beneficial in the way that we work. It creates an us and them divide, and it does not provide for the public to have a greater say in the makeup of their government. And I'll explain why, although Deputy Renouf, I think, gave a good explanation for that. So I listened to Deputy Gorst's opening speech, and he referred to those he spoke to saying that they regretted, and I made a note of his exact words here, they regretted losing their greatest ability to shape the government and the assembly. So that may well be what some people feel, but it is not true. Deputy Gorst is an accountant by trade and understands numbers, and I think that we have a duty to our electorate to be factual with them when we have discussions, and not simply because it's convenient to do so, nod our heads whenever they say anything and go, oh yes, that sounds good, I agree with that, because politically it's an extremely convenient thing to do because it leaves an impression on that voter that you just agree with them on everything and they're therefore more likely to vote for you. But when somebody says, oh, I regret the loss of the office of senator because that was my greatest ability to shape the government and the assembly, they're wrong, and they're wrong because it is a basic matter of mathematics. The larger your constituency, the weaker your vote. When you turn out to vote in an election where 16,000 people or whatever are turning out to vote, the power of your vote is nowhere near as strong as when that takes place in a smaller district. That's simple mathematics, sir. And so when those people were going out to vote in a senatorial election, they were really not actually exercising that much power in shaping the government. And so, in fact, they were exercising no power at the last election in shaping their government, because the makeup of the Council of Ministers and who was elected Chief Minister in 2018 was decided by the deputies. It was not decided by the senators, because 4 senators voted for one candidate, the other 4 voted for the other. It was the deputies that held the balance of power there. And so, if it is going to be that way, you have to ensure that the distribution of deputies in this assembly is done on some proportional basis to ensure that they are as representative as possible of the electorate. And the voting system that we have now, for the first time in our history, provides some mechanism to ensure that this assembly is more representative of the people of Jersey. That's been done not just in the demographics of those who make up in this assembly, but in other ways as well. In terms of how we move forward on this, if this proposition is adopted, there is no clarity as to what we get. In the corridor yesterday, I even heard one supporter of this proposition say that they'd like to see us go back to having 12 senators who were elected for 6-year terms. Well, I'd say to members, if that's what we get, the quid pro quo there is that the rest of us go back to 3-year terms. That would be a consequence of that. Is that what's in the wording of this proposition? No, it's not. There are all sorts of unintended consequences that arise from it. And so when I heard Deputy Labby yesterday say that she thought that, if there were going to be referendums on this, that they ought to be framed in questions like, do you want the island-wide mandate? Do you want super constituencies? Do you want to keep constables? I felt that I was hearing one of the worst ideas I've ever heard in this assembly, because it doesn't, that idea doesn't understand that in coming up with a decent electoral system for Jersey, we have to make trade-offs. There's no perfect system, and there's no system that everybody's going to buy into. You have to make compromises, and you have to balance some desire you might have to see in one part of the electoral system with another one. So it's very clear on record that I don't support having multiple categories of member of this assembly, and that means that I would like to see the constables as no longer members of this assembly. But I voted for the last package of electoral reforms which kept the constables here, because more important than my desire for a simplistic voting system is voter equity, and this voting system that we have now provides much greater voter equity. I decided it was worth it to make that trade-off. I compromised on one thing I believed because I thought the bigger picture was more important and the progress we got from it was worth it. Those who want to see a return to senators have no concept of these trade-offs. They want to go backwards to that system given to us by the British Home Office in 1947 on the basis of no mathematical argument in support of voter equity. They have nothing to say on that whatsoever. On the basis of no empirical data, they simply say a few people on the doorstep told me this, despite the fact that even in those constituencies where they say, oh, they spoke to me about this on the doorstep, when there was an actual opportunity for them to have their say, the data is clear. This is the system that they voted for. 80% of people who voted in that referendum voted to be rid of the senators, and they'll have each had their own reasons for that, but I'm sure that they would have made those trade-offs in their own minds as to what they thought was worth it. So this proposition risks seeing us go backwards on this rather than forwards. And if there are to be further tweaks to the electoral system, it is much better than, rather than tying hands behind the backs of PPC, it's to give them a blank canvas, allow them to go out and do that work in the way that they see most appropriate, and ask the electorate, all of the other questions that are relevant to why they might not vote or what they'd like to see to enhance democratic representation, allow that to happen. And when at the end of that, they have a package, we can then determine, does that whole package meet that balance of trade-offs in our own minds to be able to be worth supporting, knowing that not one of us will get the perfect system that has every element to it that we want to see. So, sir, I hope members will vote to reject this proposition and allow me that opportunity I so desperately desire to have those words etched on my gravestone.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I greatly valued the endorsement of holding the island-wide mandate after the elections in 2018. But, sir, after my rather uncomfortable, frustrating and unpleasant experience of holding that high office, I was left, sadly, with the impression that the role was largely pointless in practice. I canvassed along with Deputy Stevenson in the West and made it very clear that I would not support the reintroduction of senators. And so I do not think that the voters who showed their support for both of us in that election, in that district, will be surprised at all by a vote against this proposition today. I accept and understand that some people do have a historical affinity with the role, and many kindly profess their desire to vote as non-Westies for myself or for others who stood for election in my district or in others. And I did canvass in other districts. I enjoy canvassing. I think it's one of the highlights of the term in many ways, because we learn so much, we gain so much, and I enjoyed supporting my Better Way candidates and others who I felt I was able to do as an independent candidate who was known in many parts of the island. But, sir, I think now is the time to allow PPC to let this new system bed in. And there are many things that, as Deputy Alves reminded us, the Democratic Accountability report has identified that we can do that will improve our engagement and our representation of the people. Because largely one of the resounding messages from the doorsteps across the island at the last election, people were craving engagement. Essentially, we are them sitting here in this assembly and in any meeting room that we take part in. We're here to represent those people who put us here, and we are their mind and their mouthpiece in those moments, and we take decisions on their behalf, and we all do so humbly. So I would encourage members to support PPC in their further work, and particularly I really encourage members to support us in delivering the much needed constituency offices in each of our districts, because it is through offering that connection with our constituency that we will truly be the proper mouthpieces of our constituents, and we can listen and engage. But at the moment, the way our assembly and our government structure is constructed, there's support for our assembly work, which is, of course, of critical importance. There is support for those in government, in their government work and policy making. But for constituency work, in fact, there is absolutely no support whatsoever. And I think the CPA benchmarking that Deputy Alves and others pointed us to during the lifetime of the last Assembly is something we need to refer back to, and we need to better think how we deliver that constituency work, because that is the most critical part of our role in representing the public. And I think it is something sometimes that we do off the side of our desk, and it leads to us not being as responsive as we could and we should be to our constituents. So I would certainly support an island-wide poll for Chief Minister. I think that was one of the items identified by the Democratic Accountability Group, and I think that may help islanders to have a bit of a say if that's what they want to do about who leads the Assembly in the next Assembly, or perhaps if this term of office sees a change of leadership, perhaps it might happen before that. We never know. But Sir, it is for those reasons that I will not be supporting this proposition, well-meaning as it is.
Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Bash.
So I agreed with a great deal of what Deputy Mezek said, but I think he was wrong to suggest that senators were imposed upon the island by the British Home Office. If Deputy Mezek rereads the minutes of evidence which were given to the Royal Commission in 1946, he will see that the suggestions which led to the creation of the office of senator essentially came from those who had given evidence to the Commission. It was a trade-off. It was the means of removing the jurats from the states. So we all, those of us who have been in this assembly before, we all carry baggage in this debate. We have all listened to too many of these debates, as a matter of fact. Mine is the same, perhaps, as that of Deputy Renouf, and it is the report of the Electoral Commission, which reported in 2013. And the last Assembly did, in effect, achieve the recommendations of that Commission by bringing in the removal of the senators and the substitution of larger districts with a number of members representing them. Of course, the change that was brought in by the last Assembly was not exactly that recommended by the Electoral Commission, and that, I must say, I regret, because what was brought in was a larger number of districts, and the consequence of that was that the equality of voting, which was one of the important principles espoused by the Electoral Commission, was destroyed. And so we now have a situation where we do not have equality of voting. If you live in Grouville or St. Martin's, you elect 3 representatives to the states. If you live in St. Saviour, you elect 5, and so on. And that is inequitable, and I hope it's a matter which the Privileges and Procedures Committee might look at. Even so, sir, the changes brought in by the last Assembly and the changes which have brought about the election of this Assembly were, in my view, enormously beneficial. There was no district, as other members have said, where there was no election for a deputy. The former deputy of Grouville, Deputy Labby, maybe former deputy of St. Martin, Deputy Luce, have benefited from, in the past, being nodded in as a deputy, because they were clearly effective deputies and nobody thought that it was appropriate or possible to challenge them. And that is not democratic. We have a much better system today where in every district in the last election for deputies there was an election. Deputy Gorst says that he does not want to bind the hands of the Assembly, but of course that's exactly what he does want to do. And Deputy Renouf made a very powerful speech, I thought, about the issue of whether the membership of, or the reinstatement of senators was a settled issue. It certainly isn't a settled issue. And why on earth should this Assembly tell the PPC to go away and consider something with their hands tied behind their backs in relation to senators. So my manifesto, which is the same, or was the same as that of Deputy Luce, said that we would keep an open mind on the question of the introduction of senators. And to an extent, my mind is open. I think it might be possible to reinstate senators by reducing the number of members of each district. Whether that is a desirable thing to do is another matter. But what is absolutely clear to me is that the Privileges and Procedures Committee should have a clean slate, and that when it looks at these issues, it should do so without having any inhibitions and without having its hands tied behind its back in relation to the question of senators.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to start by congratulating Deputy Goss for bringing this proposition for the Assembly. It is important that we're talking about our voter engagement, that we commit to our manifesto pledges, no ifs, no buts. So congratulations to Deputy Goss for seeing through your manifesto pledge, because this is what I believe we need more from this Assembly, is people who are actually going to keep the promises that they bring on manifestos and actually take more time to engage with the public and follow up on the promises that they make. Doesn't mean that this Assembly is going to agree. Obviously, I'm standing here with Reform Jersey, who have kept the same pledges over and over again. We bring the same pledges term on term to try and improve the equality for islanders on many, many occasions. And I don't believe this improves the equality on voting right. We're hearing that certain districts now, the balance isn't right. So St Saviour's gets 5 votes, but Grouville St Martin's only gets 3. Well, before certain parts of St Helier with the senators would have had maybe 15 votes, and Grouville would have still have only had 11. So the balance is still not right, and bringing back the senators will not bring back around this balance that is so desperately craved. There is other methods that may do this, but unfortunately that might sacrifice a different role within this government, which some people want to see and some people don't want to see. But I'm going off at a tangent. I did want to keep this brief, and I'm still capable of doing so. That we need to engage with voters better, and an island-wide mandate struggles to make that possible. You're dealing with 103,000 people that are trying to select between island-wide people that they may feel represents them, may have time to see them, may not have time to see them. The deputies, the way it is constructed now, allows people to know who represents them in their areas. They now have more choices in these areas. Grouville and St Martin's, I'll use that example because this is where I actually live. I could now have 3, if I wasn't elected, I would have 3 people that I could choose. If I couldn't get hold of Deputy Labbe, I could get hold of Deputy Binet. If I couldn't get hold of Deputy Binet, I could get hold of Deputy Luce. And eventually the constable, as he's making gestures towards me, that you would be, of course, my first port of call, but you are a very busy man. And you've actually distracted me, so apologies. So at least with this new setup, people have more options of people that they can engage with. They have their constables, they have their deputies. So this is what I believe PPC needs to focus on, is how to get better engagement and better reaction from the public to encourage them to vote. Removing the senators didn't dramatically drop the number of people who turned out to vote. It also didn't dramatically increase the number of people who turned out to vote. So maybe people's ability and how they vote is the problem, not the roles and positions that we hold within this Assembly. As has been pointed out, every person in here has 1 vote. That 1 vote goes to the consensus for what this chamber is designed for. Does it matter then if we're voted for our parish, for an area, or just to represent an equal number of people? I mean, that was something else that was mentioned by Deputy Miller, that the district of Trinity, St John's and St Lawrence is a very large one. But it's about the number of people that live within that area. I ran in St Helier South. Though linearly, I didn't have to take that many steps. Vertically, I had to go up quite a few, which also meant having to go back down them as well. And so it's about the number of people we're representing. We all have our share of people that we are looking after and we can represent, and they can approach us. And I think that is important for us to remember. And as the Chief Minister mentioned with constituency officers, once these are all set up and running properly and balanced for every single constituency, people will have a single point of contact where they can go to meet us. Sorry, a single place of contact where they can come to meet us. But when you take away 8, 9, 12 of these representatives to be senators again, that becomes diluted. There's less options for people to actually get in touch with a representative in a specific place at a specific time. And I believe that is what we should be focusing on rather than the positions. So thank you very much.
Colin Thompson Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure members will have made their mind up about which way they are going to vote on this proposition, but I do feel that it is my duty to stand up and speak for the parishioners of St Lawrence about this, because we are criticised very much by the public for not listening to what they say, for not listening to what they want us to do. And we've proven that by ignoring the results of 2 referenda. And when Deputy Russell Labbe, who has been referenced in this debate, undertook his parish roadshow in St Lawrence, it was absolutely clear that what was being proposed by the then PPC was not what was wanted by those who attended the roadshow, and it was a good turnout there. So we don't listen very often to what we are asked to do or to what we are in fact told. But I committed before the election to supporting the return of the island-wide mandate. That is in my manifesto. Health reasons this year or last year prevented me from knocking on as many doors in the parish as I had done in the past. However, most of those doors that were answered, people told me that they wanted us to get on with the hospital. Get on with the hospital. And many people said to me that they were not voting in the forthcoming election, which is disheartening when you're knocking on someone's door to seek their vote, but they were not going to vote in the forthcoming election because they had lost the island-wide mandate. That isn't anecdotal, that is evidential to me, because that is what I was being told by my parishioners. I have to act as their voice in this assembly. So what we are asking PPC to do, if this is carried today, is to engage again with the public and with members. Yes, Groundhog Day, but we need to... I was vice chairman of PPC some years ago when the then Constable of St Clement chaired it. And we've been through this. I know for the now Constable of St Martin, it's not an easy job to chair PPC and to deal with changes to the makeup of the Assembly. However, I am committed to support this proposition because that is what, when I door knocked, I was asked to do, to support the return of the island-wide mandate and the position of senator. So that, sir, is what I will be doing today. Thank you, sir.
Much, Colin Thompson. Any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Colin Thompson, Saviour.
Thank you, sir. In a very similar vein to the Constable of St Lawrence, I did extensive door knocking when I stood for Constable of St Saviour, and a high number of people were quite irritated by the fact and quite angry that senators had been done away with. And many people actually said, no disrespect, but I'm not going to vote at all for anybody. So upset am I that this has happened. And I did point out that I wanted to keep senators, but obviously I respect their decision. The overwhelming majority of people that have spoken to me, my parishioners, would like senators reinstated, and I will be voting accordingly, sir. Thank you.
Andrews.
Thank you, sir. During the election,
we knocked on about 2,000 doors. And I would often just ask a question, what are your priorities that you'd like to see be addressed? And many people would actually respond by saying, well, I want to see a reintroduction of senators. Now, there was a few members of the electorate who were specific in saying they would maybe want 8 members. There's a couple who said they would prefer an island-wide mandate, for instance, where it's only all senators for 37 positions. And I have to listen to those members of my electorate. And I'd probably say there's 6 to 7 households every single day who are telling me this, that they missed not having senators in this election. They were only able to actually vote for potentially 1 candidate for Connaught and also up to 4 candidates for deputy. I also mentioned briefly yesterday about my views in terms of constitutional reform, sir, and I do believe that there should only be 1 position in this legislature, and that should be for senators to be the only sole position in our legislature. And I think that is because the main reason being that we need to have members who are more politically broad and who are also able to really focus on island-wide issues. However, as it currently stands, we have Connaught, for instance, who are really decentralised from legislative assemblies, say if we're looking at the role in other jurisdictions. However, they sit in our legislature. So again, it's rather convoluted, that position, with the Connaughts remaining in office, and I think that's something potentially that needs to be looked into maybe later on this term. However, I also have to acknowledge as well the amount of people who informed me they wanted to vote for Deputy Christina Moore, and they wanted to vote for her because they believed that she was the right choice for Chief Minister. And there's probably about 60 or 70 households who mentioned this to me. There's also about 5 or 6, maybe 7 households where the response was for Deputy Philip Balash to be Chief Minister. And I thought that was very interesting. But in both cases, those candidates, my electorate were unable to vote for them. And I think that was a great shame. And one of the benefits, I believe, sir, in having senators be reintroduced, members of the electorate will have a say in potentially voting for up to 13 candidates in St Helier North. And if there's potentially the second perspective, where if it's going to be an island-wide mandate, there's going to be 1 Connaught candidate and also 37 candidates for senator that the electorate can vote for. And I think, again, it's allowing members of the electorate to have more say in terms of who represents them in the legislature. At the moment, what we do see is in St Helier North, the electorate can only have a say for 5 members within the legislature in terms of who they want to have represent them. And I think that is very much limiting when we have a legislature where there are 49 members. And sir, I think it's also quite important moving forward that we focus on senators who are going to be in a position to focus on island-wide matters, but also we do see a devolvement of powers. And this has also been something that the UK Labour Party are deciding upon at the moment for the next general election. And it's something that I have always really believed in, that should happen here, where Connaughts have a role decentralised from the Assembly, but also there will be a greater headcount at a decentralised level, at parish level, where there would actually be councils in place. Therefore, it means constituents will have more people representing them, and it also allows for members within this national unicameral legislature to really focus on the politically broad issues moving forward. And sir, that is the views I have, and I must thank members for listening to me. So thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Connaught Trinity.
Thank you, sir. Just briefly, I feel that my position here is to represent the electorate of Trinity, and like the Constable of St Lawrence, when we had the roadshow visit Trinity to look at the proposed changes that were brought in during the last assembly, there are clearly people in my parish who were happy with those changes, but unfortunately out of the about 160 people who turned up to that meeting, about 10 of them tops were of that mind. The remainder were in favour of maintaining the status quo. And since that time, I've had nobody come to me and say, what a good job we did make those changes. Everybody that I have spoken to has said, we still regret the loss of the island-wide vote, which enables us to have a greater influence on the totality of who sits in this assembly at election time. So I'm afraid I will be supporting this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. I spoke earlier in one of the amendments in saying that I would not be supporting this proposition. And there's been a number of contributions about the fact that many of the elected members in the Assembly, sir, had in their manifestos that they would pledge to reintroduce senators. I'm often asked, sir, as Minister of External Relations, about human rights. And of course, human rights are numerous in their requirements. And Article 21 says everyone has the right to take part in government of their country directly or through freely chosen representatives. Everyone has the right to equal access to public service in their country. The will of the people shall be the basis of authority of government that will be expressed in a periodic and genuine elections, which shall be universal and equal suffrage and should be held by secret vote or equivalent free voting procedures. So those are the words in the human rights statement, and I agree with them, absolutely. We know that democracy is the best form of running an organisation, running an administration, a dependency, a country or whatever. It's also about prioritisation. And what I totally respect, and Deputy Gorse and I have worked well together in the past, and we're working well as ministers in our respective different roles as being deputies. And I heard also in St Saviour, and I tried to ask a question, and you were quite right, sir, not asking me to ask a question of the Minister. I'm a deputy of St Saviour, and I have been a deputy of St Helier and a senator, and now I'm a deputy of St Saviour. And when the facts change, I change my mind. And the facts is that this is, as far as I can see, the most democratically elected assembly we have ever seen. And as Deputy Balash said, there were free and fair elections amongst all of the deputies' seats, which were not the case in the past. And whether or not the size of the constituencies are right or wrong, we had free and fair elections which worked. And what I heard from the people on the doorsteps that I knocked on was an absolute exasperation to press the no button to a government, in their view, that they felt was failing. The people of Jersey felt in the last election that the best was in the past, and the best was definitely not in the future. And now we have an assembly led by a chief minister with powerful scrutiny, with connotabs, in a different composition that is now attending to what is a world series of events that is a world in crisis. And we need to prioritise our work in this assembly about what we do. And I understand that there is a latent view about senators, and I have been one of them. In fact, I did the eulogy for a senator that was pretty controversial, a deputy de Carteret, who caused a right kerfuffle with the then great senators of Lamarck, etc., who brought a proposition to this assembly as a St Lawrence deputy to bring down the Postal Administration Committee, of which the late Senator Lamarck was the chair. And that deputy brought it down, and when he stood for senator, there hadn't been a series of senatorial roadshows. He said, I'm going to have, in my senatorial election, hustings at every single parish. And that is the nexus. That's the reason why we ended up with the senatorial roadshow. Now, I've been through those roadshows, and I've been part of them, and I was once a poll topper, and then one that came number 6. And when I hear members very respectfully saying about the senators, about an island-wide mandate and 18 people being chosen, I have to say the mathematics of that is that you will not get legitimacy in terms of when we look at expert bodies, of which we've had a number, and Deputy Renouf and Deputy Balash have both been part of it as other members of this assembly. There are a number of issues about the legitimacy of elections. And one of them is the amount of people that you can reasonably choose in an election. I have to say, and I don't wish to cast any negativity towards our sister island, but I question whether or not a system in Jersey or anywhere would be possible to have a legitimate election with more than 6 or 7 people on it. And I know that there was a view, and I was part of a senatorial system when they were merged, that with an 8-seat senatorial system. There is an issue of how many people the electorate can choose from and how democracy works. And that might be really uncomfortable. And it certainly speaks to a world which I think the island has rejected comprehensively, which is that they don't want party politics. And I may well anger some members about that. But my sense is that on the one side, people wanted to express their view of the elected membership of this assembly, that they weren't doing what they wanted in terms of all of the issues that we decide in terms of both the legislature and the government, and they wanted better results for themselves on house prices, on recruitment issues, on public finances, on tax, on hospital. And I think that this assembly is getting on with the tasks and the jobs in hand that need to be the priorities about what a democracy results in, which is a government, and then a government being held to account and running being overseeing a civil service and all the rest of it. And I have to say to Deputy Gorst, I thank him for bringing this proposition, but this discussion about ourselves, again, having spent hours, months of time about electoral reform, simply is not something that we should be taking up time, and I've spoken for nearly 6 minutes and 12 seconds. This is not something that I'm hearing now that people are clamouring for. And I think that we should simply, I don't know whether to abstain or vote against, but what I do know is that this issue of senators and whether or not they come back, there are hard questions about the legitimacy of previous senators' elections compared to the deputorial elections which I went through and saw in the various different constituencies. Every person in this assembly, every member that got here went through an election or through their parish process. It's legitimate, it's better, and it's working. And I think we should improve the issues about electoral turnout. I think we should see how the responsibilities of deputies with multi-parishes should work, and we should not look backwards with rose-tinted spectacles on that have got barnacles on, that senators were the single solution to everybody's problem. Because I happen to think that actually what Deputy Andrews said about their expressions of personalities, that yes, Deputy Moore was incredibly popular in lots of parishes, and she topped the poll in her constituency, and then we ended up voting her as Chief Minister. And so somehow democracy is working, and it's working without senators. And so if we now send a message out that we're going to go back to the past, we're going to reopen all the debate about whether or not we're going to have an island-wide mandate, I don't think I can't change the past, but we can make decisions today about what we know. And what we know is that we've got a better and democratically accountable assembly. The public have said they don't like parties, I think. They've said they want change and they want us to get on and deal with the things that they're worried about. And that means putting off, I'm afraid, for PPC, more tortuous discussions about electoral reform in the sense of senators and deputies. And so, sir, I think Deputy Gorst's proposition is respectfully the right thing to do because he put it in his manifesto. But where we are today, I cannot think of one good reason why the resources of our public sector, and I include the PPC, should be spent on rehashing within the timetable that this proposition asks us to do about the issues of senators. There may be a time when we do need to, in maybe 1 or 2 years' time, after the work and the results of this composition of the Assembly and ministerial government, etc., we do need to look at further issues about boundaries and composition of the states. But I say very clearly that this is not a priority. The people that the members that used to sit where the constables are today and putting them back and then moving the constables back here and having more deputies there, I'm afraid that this is not an issue that the people want us to deal with, certainly the voters of St Saviour. And I stood in St Saviour unexpectedly as a deputy, and I got in. And I'm very happy as a deputy of St Saviour. I want to work hard as being a deputy of St Saviour and a minister, and working with what I think is the best assembly that we've seen, diversity or all the rest of it. And members know that I'm diverse in one respect, but I don't normally talk about it. And we should get on and deal with the important issues that public have put us here to do, and we should reject this assembly and stop talking about ourselves. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputies. Any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Colin Tarbison, Brillard.
Thank you, sir. And I think, well, I, for one, am actually on the fence with regard to this proposition, because as my other colleagues on the constable benches have mentioned, several of us have been addressed directly on the doorsteps whilst electioneering on this very matter. And there's no doubt about that whatsoever. One has to listen. Having been in the States for several years, so I've seen various machinations come forward. And I think sometimes we need to learn from what's taken place in the past and decisions which have been made, which haven't, dare I say it, always been the right ones. And I think that the abolition of the 12 senators and the 6-year recycling, if you like, or 3-year recycling was probably a mistake. It worked. I don't think there's any reason why it shouldn't have continued. I also feel that sometimes we tend to be led by the nose by outside influences, and with all due respect to the Electoral Commission, they don't always understand what works best in Jersey. And I think we as a chamber knows what best works in Jersey, and as do the electorate. And why should we be continually cajoled into making decisions which aren't always the best and are proven not to be the best? I don't think this present system is a bad one. I would prefer to allow PPC to have a free hand to do what they wish. And the detail of the proposition is such that it's a little bit tying. I'd rather it didn't have a date on it, because I don't think realistically July 23 is a realistic date for PPC to achieve what is being proposed. And it may be for PPC to come back with a counter proposition, or maybe for the Senator, when he sums up, to comment on how that might be achieved. So based on representations, and one thing I must say in response to the last speaker, sir, I'm quite happy to keep the seat warm for Deputy Gorst, should he wish to return to this side of the chamber. I realise it's something which some former senators may be concerned about, but we were always, I'm sure, as constables, move seats if required. I don't think the general electorate are terribly interested in that, but we have flexibility. So, sir, whilst I would dearly like to support PPC on this, I don't really feel I can in the face of what the electorate are telling me. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Conitar? Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. And I'll try and be brief, despite over 20 years in this chamber discussing and debating this particular option. My starting point is very clear, very simple. I think we should not vote for this amendment. I think it takes us backwards and not forwards. It's not about progress, it's about returning to the past, a past which I would argue didn't work very well for democratic purposes. And we have improved on it in our last moves. So I just address some of the words of the PPC committee as following. The committee believes that it would be beneficial to let the new system bed in following significant changes that were made to the electoral system during the last term. So a plea calmly and collectively to carry on with their work let's do some more improvements. We're getting somewhere with this. The changes followed the 2018 election observers mission, which found that the electoral system was overly complicated and cumbersome. External advice that we've sought about what's wrong with our system, it's cumbersome. Enough said, let's have listened. Following significant work undertaken by PPC subcommittee, PPC proposed moving to 2 categories of member in order to simplify the system for the electorate. So a simpler system again, the right move. This was accepted by the Assembly and the changes were implemented in time for the 2022 election. So this Assembly listened and agreed with a move to simplicity. Later on, PPC say, in the 6 months since the elections, there has been no discernible impact on the work of the Assembly from the so-called loss of the senators. So is the system working as it is, the new system? Yes, it is. And they go on to explain, one consequence of the revised system is that the public have a wider choice of constituency representation than previously existed, as it was rare for senators to engage with parochial issues. So there's a significant weakness being highlighted by PPC. It's all very well to praise the senators, but they rarely get involved in the dirty stuff, as it were, sorting out other people's problems. It's rare to see a senator engage in that way, whereas deputies do and do regularly, as I know full well. So over 20 years debating this particular issue. And why is it that I feel that actually in those 20 years or 20 plus years, I've got nowhere? Here we are debating this issue again. It feels like I'm back on square one. It feels like I've been playing the longest game of snakes and ladders in the world. 20 odd years, and we've just got over the last little ladder to get on the top rung of the board, and we're getting somewhere. But look out, the slimiest, horriblest, longest snake is not very far away. And if we vote for this proposition, we'll be voting for the snake. And it will take us all the way down, curly-whirly, to the back row. You'll be like starting again. Please, please don't have me start again on this particular issue.
Over to Jeanne.
Thank you, sir. And I know I will be brief because we've discussed this lots and lots. Many people have said many different things, but I just wanted to express that I have found this really difficult to find where I should go with this debate and where it should fall. Because on one hand, as many of my fellow deputies in District 3 and some of the constables have said that, yes, on the doorstep, I did hear that there was dissatisfaction with not having island-wide votes. On the other hand, and it's good in the sense to follow Deputy Southern, is that I only came back to the island in late 2018, and I haven't been following Jersey politics for many, many years since I left before I was, when I was a teenager, so wasn't really, of course, very interested. And so I only saw what happened in the last States Assembly, and I saw exactly what our Chief Minister has explained in, for example, her situation, where you had senators who, some were chosen into being ministerial roles, others were ignored, even though there was, they were given the most popular votes, or they were given the big amounts of votes. So I really did have to question what was the point of the senator's role. It seemed to be a lot of work from the outside to be a senator, but then for not much gain at the end of it. And so I was very, in a way, pleased when there was that change, that I felt that very confident to come in to be a deputy in the new districts that were developed. Of course, as a St Johnny, it felt very strange to go from St Johnny and also to start to get to know people in Trinity and St Lawrence, but I did full-heartedly, and I went and knocked on lots of doors. I attended lots of events. I feel now part of the community of Trinity and St Lawrence. I know many people who are also very much involved in the communities in those three parishes. And I really felt that also, not only that, is that I really felt there was competition when we did the elections. I feel that I stand here today, that I went through the election and I'm legitimately standing here today. We did 12 hustings, so I nearly did the same as a senator would have done. So I really feel, and just in our district alone, I think we did about 7. So I know that my constituents know who I am. I really spent a long time not only explaining my positions, my manifesto, where I want to see the island and how I want to help the island. I also felt that I knocked on a lot of doors and had those discussions. Yes, one of the issues was about bringing back senators. But I feel that that was because at that moment in time, we haven't got to this point. We were still in the moment of experiencing this new way, these new districts. And I feel that now we've seen the results of that. And many people have said that today, many colleagues have said that today. We feel that we're more diverse in this assembly. We feel that there are more maybe different experiences of people's past who can bring that into the assembly. And it feels then more cohesion and being able to actually move forward. And as Deputy Joseph has said, we have a lot of crises that are impacting Jersey, whether it is the war of the Ukraine, whether it is climate change, because we are experiencing that even as we speak. So we need to come together and sort out and support our islanders. And I think this is not then the moment to be, again, rearranging how we see, how we ourselves want to be positioned. People have said already in this debate that this is not the end of the debate. We are still, PPC still have a number of work to do to see how it is that we can then encourage more islanders to vote, because ultimately that is the most important. How can we help to increase our democracy by encouraging people to engage with us more and understand that that's really important. So for me, at this moment in time, and maybe I've talked myself into where I want to go, and where I want to go with this, with my voting. But I feel that though I understand those people that I spoke to on the door, I feel that that was a moment in time before they now can see what we are now. And I would like to potentially go back to those people and to be able to ask them, and so what you've seen now what these changes have done. Are you still in favour of an island-wide vote, and why? And would that increase our legitimacy overall, would that encourage more people to come out and vote? And on that evidence, I would then go back and say, yes, maybe then we need an island-wide vote. But until I have that evidence base, and until I have that where we've seen the analysis coming out from this current system, then I feel that I can't vote for something that was about the past and not about now. Thank you.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. I wasn't going to speak, but I've actually been moved to speak by Deputy Jeanne because what she was saying actually resonated with me, and the way that I was thinking as a member of PPC as well about the role that PPC has to play in managing change within the Assembly as an organisation. And those of you that have worked in business and management will be familiar with the change curve. And of course, the question in my mind is where those members were on the change curve when they put a commitment to reinstating senators in their manifestos, and also where voters may have been on that change curve. And, those of you that might be unfamiliar with what happened, you go through denial, anger, acceptance, and then support. And for me, that's why I was quite happy with the comments that we put together for PPC, because giving change the opportunity to work within any organisation is really important, and also how we manage that change within an organisation is important. And I think really the role now for PPC as a committee in dealing with this change, and I think Deputy Alves made some really good points about what PPC wasn't able to do in the last term of office because of COVID. We now need to go out and explain and engage with voters, do the voter education, and I can't remember who it was that talked about, I think it may have actually been Deputy Tadier, said that more change now will add to further confusion when we get to the next election. So that's where I'm sitting, and that's my answer back to what Deputy Jean was saying as well. Yesterday, I switched on BBC Radio Jersey, and I heard the former Deputy Russell Labby on the radio. And he actually, when I first heard his voice, I thought he was probably talking ahead of this debate, having been the former chair of PC, and I see the Constable of Grieville nodding at me. He obviously heard it as well. And shock horror, he was suggesting that the day of the Battle of Flowers should be changed. My first reaction to the idea and the notion that the Battle of Flowers should be on a late Friday afternoon rather than a Thursday afternoon, I was quite disappointed, because traditionally the Battle of Flowers always happens on the second Thursday of August, and it never rains. So I actually had to go through the change curve myself, I have to say. But what I realised is what Deputy Labbe was doing, or the former Deputy Labbe was doing in his new role as chair of the Battle of Flowers Association, is trying to balance our local traditions with the changing times and the requirements of those changing times and our changing population. I was also surprised to hear that he was suggesting that groups of people could have floats, and I did think at that point in time I could message my Reform Jersey colleagues and suggest we get our own float together. But we'll see about that. Won't promise that. But I think going back to that balance of tradition, but also changing with the times and the requirements of the island, I'm reminded of some of the comments actually made by Deputy Balash around the introduction of senators, and he was talking about the introduction of senators in 1947. Now, that may well have been correct, an island-wide mandate at that point in time for that population. But the population of the island was far less at that point in time than it is now. We now have a far bigger population, and as we have heard from many speakers today, that connection with a constituency, I think a number of us are finding very, very useful, and I think given the opportunity for these changes to bed in, for people to get used to this change and how to work with this change, will enable us to work with our constituents far more effectively. And I wonder what going back to senators would also mean. Would that mean that we'd end up with fewer deputies in each of those constituencies? Would people have fewer people to contact? We just don't know. So I think there's far too many questions around this proposition to be able to support it. I think it's far too soon for us to be looking at the success or not of the most recent changes, although, as Deputy Stevenson has pointed out, we have already seen some marks of success. But we really do need to follow the change curve through and see this change bed in. So I urge people to support this proposition.
Deputy Alex
I urge members to reject the proposition.
Just checking that everyone was on the ball, were you, Deputy? Deputy Alex Curtis.
Ma'am?
I've got you noted next.
If I may,
Deputy.
I'd like to propose Standing Order 84, proposition to end the debate, which I can do without notice.
Yes, you may. If you just bear with me, because my standing orders are in the desk in front. I think by convention. We've had 16 people having spoken, which is a sizable amount of the assembly, and by convention, the chair can determine whether or not the matter can go to a vote straight away. If I think, I'm just trying to find in my book. Yeah, if at least 10 members have spoken, so I think you're well within that amount. In which case, if you are working on Standing Order 84, which is that we've had an hour that has elapsed, and you're making that proposal, so within 30 minutes' time that we would move to the vote. I think that. At the moment, I have listed just to speak Deputy Alex Curtis and yourself, but that was to make this. I mean, it might be useful, perhaps, from the chair to have an indication if there are any other members who are wishing to speak, who have yet to speak.
Can I just ask a point of order? So the standing order, to refresh our memories, is that in half an hour's time we will vote on whether to cease the debate or to continue. Is that correct?
I think it goes straight to the vote, Deputy Angela.
But to the vote to whether to continue or not?
No, it goes straight to the vote. To the vote itself.
Sorry, correction. Is it not that the proposer sums up and then there's a vote? So
Yes,
we don't go.
yes.
We vote whether to stop the debate and then
Absolutely.
And if that proposition is successful, then the proposer sums up straight away.
Yes. Yeah, it's exactly that. So basically, we allow the proposal and then immediately put the proposal to the vote without debate on whether to close. We have a closure. We have a vote on the closure, and then we move. If that goes through, we would move to summing up of the debate. Yeah. Okay. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, Mum. I hope the deputy wasn't doing that to target me to speak. And I trust I can fit this within 60 seconds. There have been so many good points raised, whether by Deputy Reniff, Deputy Joseph, Deputy Alves. But I think I'm going to reflect on what I said during the election campaign, and I can only think of one time I actually referenced a position I stood on this. It was within the hustings that are recorded and are on YouTube. And I said, I'm quite happy for the states and for the island to consider the return of senators, or to consider an island mandate, or consider reform of the electoral system. But I did say that I was not happy to support any knee-jerk reaction by the Assembly to make that change. Now, I'm very glad that PPC have provided a comments paper that affirms that the position I took prior to being elected is remarkably similar to theirs. I believe in data and evidence, and I believe we have a lot to learn from the outcomes and the work of this Assembly to allow the island to make that decision. Ma'am, there are decisions that do need to be made quickly. There are decisions that can take time. Sometimes we confuse which decisions fall into which camp. So I urge members to think that actually a vote against Deputy Gorst's proposition here is not a vote against senators. It's a vote against a very early decision without the proper data in front of us, and it would not be fair for me to represent my constituents by not making data-driven decisions, and I urge members to think which camp this decision lies, the former or the latter.
Does any other member wish to speak? Very well. If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and I call upon Deputy Gorse, sorry, for the time to reply.
Thank you, Mark. Just as Deputy Mezek wishes to be buried on his gravestone with the term "the last senator," perhaps I will have the last referred to as senator by the chair in the Assembly. Ma'am, there's been some excellent speeches throughout the course of this debate, and I'm very grateful to all members. Unfortunately, they haven't always been on my side of the argument. These are issues which can touch on deeply held views about democracy, about accountability, about the integrity of our democratic system, but also about history, about connectivity with the public. And it's right that we, although perhaps we've spoken longer than we might have liked to have done and taken up more time than was necessary, we are a debating chamber, and it's right that we make our views known and provide our considered opinion. Ma'am, you've told us that now 17 people have spoken in this debate. It feels like more, but that doesn't seem quite, I don't think when I started this debate would I have thought that 25 seemed such a large number, but that is the number that is required.
In fact, it's 26, Deputy. We I think, miscounted from the Graffier's desk, so it is right that it was more speeches than you thought it was.
Well, that indeed is then an interesting statistic that we've had more speakers than is required to vote one way to get this proposition over the line. And electoral reform is never easy nor straightforward, and I think many have made that point in their speech. And as I said in my opening speech, there are many things which the government and this Assembly is and has rightly prioritised during the course of the first 6 or so months of our time in office, and that should not change. Islanders' priorities should be the priorities of government and their legislative assembly. And so in some respects, voting to in principle say that a return to the island-wide mandate, that is the easy bit. All of the questions that members were asking about, well, what does that mean going forward? They rightly fall into the work that the chair of PPC said that she and her committee was undertaking. And in actual fact, ma'am, during the course of the chair of PPC's speech, she almost persuaded me to let her and her committee just take this work forward. But I do think that reading between some of the lines that, and other members said, that this vote wasn't necessary at this point. There would be other occasions on which we could vote to return or reinstate or restore even an island-wide mandate, and that there would be plenty of time. I don't accept that argument. I think experience shows to us that unless we make early and in principle decisions around electoral change, it won't happen. And I say experience tells us that because a number of members referred in their speech to 2013, when a referendum was undertaken and option B was successful, and yet it took the best part of 10 years to introduce something that resembled option B into the electoral system.
And so it might be appealing for some members to think, well, they'll have another vote in due course upon the reintroduction of the island-wide mandate. I don't accept that, and I think that what we will find, if this is not carried today, all of those who don't want to see any change will be absolutely delighted, because there won't be the change and there won't be the reintroduction of the island-wide mandate. I also want to say, as I said in my opening comments, that there were improvements on the old system that this current system has introduced, and I concur with the view that we have a more diverse assembly, we have a strong assembly, and the island very clearly showed and was enabled to vote to deliver on its priorities.
I believe the Constable of St Saviour will be adding to the Christmas appeal in due course. Sorry, Deputy, please go on.
Okay, and that's something that I think we should, and it is appropriate to recognise. But as we deliver on all of the priorities, as members have said, around housing, around health, around the cost of living, and we deliver relentless focus upon those issues, that does not mean we should also forget our other commitment to the electorate and the very strong sense, and I accept absolutely what Deputy Stevenson and the Chief Minister said, we out west, and we revel in our uniqueness. Of course, the electorate voted for 2 members who were very strongly said they wished to reintroduce the island-wide mandate, and 2 members who equally as strongly made it clear that they supported the new system and that they would not be voting for a reintroduction of the island-wide mandate. And that, sir, is democracy in action. And so that is why I accept that for some, the issue is not clear-cut, despite what I think was an overwhelming voice on the doorstep about the reintroduction of the island-wide mandate. And therefore, I do think it is legitimate, despite having spent longer than I would have wished, to raise this issue and to challenge ourselves around the commitments that we made to the electorate in the previous or last election. And we've had some colourful speeches as well, sir, not just well-argued speeches. Perhaps one of the most colourful was one that we've just had around the slimiest, longest, curliest snake, and I'm pleased that the deputy that used that picture swerved away from suggesting that that was a description of the mover of this proposition, but it was rather relating to that old board game. We also, of course, Sir, had Deputy Tadier yesterday and reminding us of his father and his growing of a beard. And I would say to him that whilst that was an interesting indeed anecdote, if members care to look across to my right, they will see this morning that, I'll be careful how I phrase this, sir, that Deputy Tadier is himself this morning coming and seeking to emulate his father, which goes to show that a beard can be grown, can be shaved off, and can be grown again. And I would argue, rather than the arguments that he made, is that islanders were disappointed that the beard of the island-wide mandate was shaved off and would wish us, as you yourself would wish us to grow that beard again. There is an old song, sir, which I will quote only the first line, and those that know it will know why I'm not quoting the second, which is, "You don't know what you've got until it's gone." And that was the overwhelming sense that I got on the doorstep during the election, and the reason that I think it is right that we have this debate and this discussion today. Statistics, as we heard from Deputy Mezek, can be used to prove any argument that the larger the constituency, the more, let's use this phrase, more watered down the influence of the individual is. But the greater the number of island-wide mandates that there are, the more involved and islanders' influence is increased by that mandate. So it was the most democratic mandate of this Assembly. It was by referendum of option B, revised, that the previous Assembly took it away. And I assert by this proposition that islanders wish to see it returned. And I also assert that if we went to the community with a referendum question, as we did with the Office of Constable, and said to islanders, do you wish to see the reintroduction of an island-wide mandate? I believe that the answer to that, could be indeed proven wrong, would be yes. So I'm grateful for the work that PPC is undertaking, and I stand ready to support them, whichever way this vote goes today. I recognise the difficulty of the timing, and as I said in my opening comments, I am prepared and would expect members to give latitude and be understanding in the work that they are undertaking. Taking care of our electoral system, ensuring that we as democratically elected politicians are connected with our community, and that our democracy has the support of islanders right across the community, is of fundamental importance. Because without that, we cannot act upon islanders' priorities, because we don't fully represent them. And therefore, sir, for me, it is quite clear. An island-wide mandate is the most democratic of mandates, and I ask members to think very carefully before they cast their vote against this proposal. And I commend it to the Assembly, and I call for the appel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been defeated. 23 votes pour, 24 votes contre.
No votes, sir.
Those voting for, the Conotabs of St Lawrence, St Bralard, Trinity, St Clement, Gruville, St Juan, St Mary and St Saviour, and deputies Labby, Luce, Morel, Lehegara, Gorst, Farnham, Miles, Scott, Rose Binet, Miller, Howell, Ferry, Barbara Ward, Wilson and Andrews. Those voting contre, the Conotabs of St Helier, St Peter, St Martin and St John, and deputies Southern, Tadier, Ayer, Rob Ward, Alves, Gardner, Moore, Mesick, Osoph, Balash, Coles, War, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Faltham, Jearn, Kovac, Alex Curtis and Stevenson, and in the chat, Deputy Doublé.
Very well. The next item of public business is the draft Marriage and Civil Partnership Amendment Jersey Law, P112, lodged by the Minister for Home Affairs. The main respondent will be the chair of the Children, Education and Home Affairs panel. And I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Marriage and Civil Partnership Amendments Jersey Law 2000, a law to amend further the law relating to marriage and civil partnership. The State, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So the draft Marriage and Civil Partnership Amendments Jersey Law will, if approved, make amendment to both the Marriage and Civil Status Amendment Number 5 Jersey Law and the Civil Partnership Amendment Jersey Law. These two laws made amendments to the Marriage and Civil Status Jersey Law 2001 and the Civil Partnership Jersey Law 2012, respectively, and were approved by the previous Assembly in March 2022. This draft law makes for corrections to provisions in those two amendment laws. The drafting corrections are fairly minor in nature, but they are necessary to enable the two amendment laws to align with both government policy and comply with ECHR. It's necessary to make these amendments to allow the two amendment laws to proceed to Privy Council to enable the numerous amendments contained within those two amendment laws to take effect. The changes will include, but are not limited to, raising the minimum age of marriage and civil partnership to 18, introducing opposite-sex civil partnerships, introducing the ability to have an alternative location for marriage or civil partnership, where the primary location is open air, introduce provisions to govern the registration of names to prohibit confusing, embarrassing or offensive names, and to introduce additional safeguards to protect people from forced or sham civil partnerships. All of these, when they take effect, will provide a benefit to the public. So it's important to note that the two amendment laws have been held back from enactment, but no unintended consequences have occurred, and the public haven't been affected by any of the provisions that have been amended by this draft law. The necessary amendments centre on provisions that set out the prohibitions that apply to both marriage and civil partnerships. Article 1 amends Schedule 1 to the Amendment Number 5 law to remove paragraph 3. Paragraph 3 consists of a table that was inadvertently included in the Amendment Number 5 law. The particular table sets out a series of relationships where two people are deemed to be within a prohibited degree of relationship for the purposes of marriage, i.e. they are prohibited from marrying one another. Unless the people mentioned in the right-hand column of the table are dead, two people cannot marry if one of those two people is a former civil partner of that person's child, the former spouse of that person's child, the parent of that person's former civil partner, or parent of that person's spouse. So to provide an example, which may or may not clarify what I've previously mentioned, if a person wanted to marry their daughter's ex-spouse, they would need to wait until their ex-partner, i.e. the other partner of their daughter, was dead, and also wait until their daughter was dead. Article 2 functions in the same way, except that it removes the table that performs the same function for civil partnerships. If we fail to amend the 2001 law and the 2012 law in this manner, it would place a prohibition on the marriage or civil partnership of a parent-in-law with his or her child-in-law unless their respective spouses or civil partners and their children or parents through whom the relationship is traced are dead. And I just need to make it clear that those provisions were included in the law that was passed by the Assembly earlier in 2022. When the law was going through for assent to Privy Council, it was found that this was incompatible with ECHR, and the case of B and L versus United Kingdom, in which the European Court of Human Rights held that such a prohibition could not be maintained as logical or rational. It's therefore necessary that we remove these tables before either the Marriage and Civil Status Amendment No. 5 law or the Civil Partnership Amendment Jersey law can come into force. So going back to Article 1, this also removes certain repetitive definitions of child of the family that are defined elsewhere in the law, and it reinserts the absolute prohibitions on the marriage of a person with his or her former adoptive grandchild and adoptive grandchild. These prohibitions were inadvertently omitted from the provisions substituted into the new Schedule 1 by the Marriage and Civil Partnership Amendment No. 5 law, and accord with government's continued policy position in this area. So in other words, it will be prohibited, an absolute prohibition, for the marriage of a person with his or her former adoptive grandchild or adoptive grandchild. If approved, it's anticipated that this law and the two amendment laws, which it makes Amendment 2, will all be registered on the same date. And the effect is that the provisions being deleted will never take effect. And with this, I present the draft law to the Assembly.
You move the principles. Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any... Deputy Balash, you indicated a wish to speak?
It was an error.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Conatarbus and Brillard.
Thank you, sir. Really a request for the Minister to clarify the point that she mentioned about having, my understanding is correct, a secondary option for a prescribed place of wedding. And this is my understanding this applies to a beach wedding which may get rained off, but I can't see in the outline of where that applies. And the second point, really a general one, in that I note that, the notes that are included in the report have attached to them a sub-note, if you like, saying that these can't be considered as legal advice. Surely, so we're making a law here, and advice given by the department to states members is legal advice, or is it not? And maybe this is something for the Solicitor General to comment on. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wish to speak on the principles? And I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. In respect of the two questions raised by the Conatable of St Brelard, in my preamble, when I was referring to the ability to have an alternative location for marriage, I should point out that that has already been debated and already passed by the Assembly. The debate we're having today is about amendments referring to insertion about prohibition of marriage, so I'm really not at a position to discuss that anymore. The second point that I would make around the legal advice is I think the legal advice here is referring to human rights notes rather than to the legal advice that was given around the preparation of the articles.
Very well. And then you maintain the proposition.
Yes, with that, I maintain the proposition and call for the appel, please.
Appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats and ask the greffier to open the voting. Vote is on the principles of the Draft Marriage and Civil Partnership Amendments Jersey Law. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted. 45 votes pour, no votes contre. Deputy Geddes, does your panel call the matter in? Very well. We move now to second reading. How do you wish to propose the articles in second reading, Minister? I see no reason why not. Yes. Are they seconded en bloc?
Yes.
Does any member wish to speak on the articles in second reading? Those in favour of adopting the articles in second reading kindly show. Those against? The articles are adopted in second reading. Do you propose the matter in third reading? Yes, sir. Is it seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Those in favour of adopting the law in third reading kindly show. Those against? The law is adopted in third reading. Very well. We now move on to the proceeds of crime, consequential and miscellaneous Jersey regulations P202, P113, I beg your pardon, lodged by the Minister for External Relations of Financial Services. The main respondent will be the chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft proceeds of crime, consequential and miscellaneous Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 44A of the Proceeds of Crime Jersey Law 1999.
Minister. Yes,
Sir, Ma'am.
I'm about to disappear momentarily.
Thank you, Ma'am. The islands, as members will be aware, the islands' preparations for the upcoming Moneyval assessment continue apace. These preparations, amongst other issues, have regard to the previous Moneyval assessment, which was carried out in 2015. That assessment flagged certain exemptions from what are anti-money laundering. We call them AML. I know members like acronyms. I'm going to use the acronym for AML, anti-money laundering, and CFT, meaning the counteracting the financing of terrorism, CFT obligations in Jersey. These all are matters which emanate from the global body of the Financial Action Task Force, and these allow certain, they permit, which we must adopt, certain exemptions only on the basis of low risk or limited activity. So as members will be aware, these all form part of a wider piece of legislation, which is called the Proceeds of Crime Law, which introduced the overall AML CFT obligations way back in 1999. Since then, the financial services sector, the activities and regulations have evolved in a number of different ways to align the regime that is advised on and then judged upon by the international standard setters and then the Moneyval assessment, which comes along and assess what effectively, how we're doing with the FATF implementation. Several existing exemptions from that law were directly linked to Jersey's regulations regarding the conduct of financial institutions and the requirements that AML CFT put on them. These activities are expected and required obligations that the FATF says in their recommendations. However, by virtue of legal arrangements and certain practice before, the regime has evolved and equally now means that certain activities that are expected to be the subject, certain activities that must have AML, the companies and the directors, etc., must perform AML and CFT obligations, and they're not specified in the current law. For example, the issues concerning virtual assets. I can advise the Assembly, Ma'am, that since 2020, a working group led by the JFSC, which includes a senior practitioner and experts from the industry, have considered the several exemptions in detail and the potential impact should those exemptions no longer be available to companies undertaking it, organisations undertaking them. The JFSC have identified the most appropriate route forward would be to disconnect AML and CFT obligations from conduct and financial obligations. This, in fact, means that where a business needs to be subject to these obligations, they will be the case irrespective of that business's other obligations. This approach provides clarity and certainty to the finance sector regarding what activities are subject to those obligations and where there is no requirement to amend in the wider network of other statutes for some financial services. This approach, as recommended in the draft law, allows the island to demonstrate that any future exemptions from obligations are fully in line with these global standards issued by the AFTF, which exempt certain operations. The JFSC and government have consulted in 2021 on the proposed changes of the proceeds of crime law, and there was further engagement on that. This feeded back to the proceeds of crime law amendment, which Deputy Gorst brought to the last Assembly and was adopted, I think, virtually without much discussion because they knew the consultation. At that time, Ma'am, that Amendment 6 was said to be the first phase of the important project of aligning all of these obligations. And these, and while the draft regulations in this proposition now represent the further conclusion of what this earlier part was. In fact, this is the second phase of what Deputy Gorst, when he brought the amendments, were through. This second phase has required consultation, and this was published in September 2022 by the JFSC. In other words, a second round of consultation. Feedback was got from the industry on the practical implementation of the removal of certain exemptions, and these are reflected in these regulations. As part of this second round of consultation, the JFSC and government took these engagements with the finance industry, and the magnitude of what was removal of a whole series of exemptions, which could be regarded as quite unprecedented in order to find an appropriate solution to a potential issue that we would find ourselves when the money val assessors came, and they would find that there would be some areas of activities which were not subject to directors, for example, actually applying AML and CFT obligations. Those areas, those exemptions left room for interpretation and would be a problem for guidance in terms of international people coming and looking and seeing what exactly was going on and which people had to undertake AML and CFT obligations, and that would be not in line with best practice. The most significant point to highlight to the Assembly is that this will provide the industry with a certain and effective solution that removes remove certain exemptions from the orders and laws that I've referred to and provide certainty to the undertakings and the money laundering requirements and also relates to what is in the money laundering order which sits under that statute. This will enable a relevant person to appoint a service provider to fulfil the obligations of AML and CFT on their behalf. Ma'am, the overall draft regulations make a number of consequential changes to other laws which reflect the removal of what are exemptions that we can no longer have. I should say that it is important that the JSSC themselves have also issued guidance and guidelines regarding of how these changes should be implemented, subject to the Assembly passing this, and there's been feedback on all of these important issues with industry experts and practitioners. These guidelines form an important tool to provide clarity and certainty to our financial services industry regarding how these amendments are going to actually be practically put into place as soon as possible. I would like to also note that the Economic and Affairs Scrutiny Panel has received a briefing on these issues, which will be a greater way of explaining these issues than I'm doing so in this introductory set of remarks. I know that they've been briefed by officials, and the Chair may well wish to make some comments in this opening part of the proposal for these amendments. Ma'am, naturally, Moneyval will thoroughly examine whether the international standards and whether the changing standards are being adopted in Jersey and whether or not we followed up on the previous recommendations that they have made. It is therefore crucial, I would say respectfully to members, that these draft regulations are adopted because they resolve what was a fairly major finding in the 2015 Moneyval assessment, and this puts us in a much better position to secure a positive outcome in that upcoming assessment, and that is why I am recommending with those hopefully, it's a complicated issue, but it has been well researched, it has been well looked into, and it is, I recommend the adoption of the regulations to the Assembly on an important issue. Thank you, Mark.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, ma'am.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Scott.
Ma'am, I can see the Minister looking at me, so I felt obliged to speak as Chairman of the Economic and International Panel, and can confirm we have had the briefing from the Minister's officers, which was very helpful, thank you, and we are supporting him in proceeding with this proposition.
Does any other member wish to speak? Well, if no other member wishes to speak, I close the debate and call on the Minister to reply.
Thank you, I'm grateful. Financial services matters often are complicated issues which this Assembly has to deal with. And so it is really important, as we heard from the previous proposition, that there is proper scrutiny and proper explanation. This is part of the parliamentary process. So I'm really grateful that the panel has looked at this, has had briefings and is supportive, and I move the principles, ma'am. Can I call for the appel?
The appel has been called for. The members are invited to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had an opportunity to cast their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the principles have been adopted, 46 votes pour and no votes contre. We've heard from the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel. I take it, Chair, that you don't wish to call this matter in. Fine.
That's correct.
In which case, Minister, how do you wish to propose the regulations?
I suggest, ma'am, members have been provided with a fulsome report on the explanation of the individual regulations. And so I don't propose to go through the regulations in detail because members have got a full report on that and how they interact. So I propose the articles together, ma'am, if I may. But of course, ready to answer any questions that members may have on any of the individual articles. Thank you, ma'am.
Very well, are regulations 1 to 10 seconded? Does any other member wish to speak on the regulations? No member wishes to speak. That draws to an end. Do you wish to take an appel on this, or
yes, can I?
Perhaps we
it's
could take it on this.
It's appropriate for an appel, ma'am, because it's important legislation.
Okay, the appel has been called for. The members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have an opportunity to cast their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the regulations have been adopted, 46 votes pour and no votes contre. Do you wish to propose the matter in third reading?
Yes, ma'am, and in the speedy way in which the Assembly has proved that, I would just say I'm grateful for members, grateful to the scrutiny panel, but also hugely grateful for the immense amount of work that goes into these matters generally, and the amount of work that industry and our regulator and our government officials and law officers do to actually bring clarity into legislation. And I am very pleased that this important issue has been resolved in a way, and this, I thank members for their support, and always ready to brief members on any individual aspects concerning what are complicated issues but important legislative changes on a massively important issue for Jersey, which all members will know is Moneyval and commanding much attention. And on those remarks, I thank members and call for standing vote on the third reading.
Well, firstly, the third reading is the matter second.
Yes.
Second in the third reading.
Yes,
Thank you. And does any member wish to speak in third reading? No. In which case, the PAL has been called for. If members would wish to return to their seats, ask members. A standing vote. You wanted a standing vote. Sorry. Those members who are in favour of adopting the regulations, the third reading, kindly show. Those against. The regulations are adopted in third reading. The next item is Assembly approval for supplementary planning guidance, P114 of 2002, lodged by Deputy Scott of St Bralard, and the main respondents are the Minister for the Environment and the Minister for Infrastructure. And I ask the Graffier to read the proposition.
Ma'am, may I move for an adjournment? I'm allowed to.
You would like to move the adjournment?
Yes, please.
Well, you're called upon
to
to open your proposition now, but any member can propose that the States adjourn until another time, and that will be taken. So it's a matter for you to move that proposition and for it to be seconded, and the Assembly to determine whether you can continue, whether we continue, or whether we adjourn. And you must say adjourn until when, I think.
Well, I perhaps should defer to the, is the chair for the Privileged Procedures Committee going to move this herself?
Well, this is not a matter
Okay.
for arrangement
Sorry.
of future business.
Right.
This has come onto your proposition.
Yes,
It's got
okay.
and it's for you to move it. If you wish to defer it, you are entitled at this stage to defer your proposition. As a matter of absolute right, you do not have to bring this before the Assembly. You can ask that it's taken on another
Okay,
occasion.
I'll proceed with my proposition, sir. That's what I was suggesting, starting after lunch.
I think she's just moving the adjournment and wants to start her proposition after lunch.
All right, very well. Well, it wasn't entirely clear to me that that's what was happening, but I'm grateful. So you would like to propose the Assembly adjourn and resume at 2:15?
Yes, sir.
Is that seconded?
Yes.
Any member wish to speak on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Sorry. Would it be possible that I suggest that we reconvene at 2 o'clock rather than the usual 2:15 and just sort of have an early lunch?
Well, I think the difficulty with someone else might stand up and say 2:45. We've got to take the first proposition first. And I think, so it must be that we reconvene at 2:15 will have to be it. Deputy Tadier?
So I just think for the sake of 15 minutes, we should give the courtesy to the Deputy who presumably wants to have a clear run. We've had a long morning debating a wide range of issues, a heavy debate, and I think rather than debating another 5-10 minutes here about whether we should have this, let's show some courtesy to one of our members.
Very well. Does anyone else wish to speak? I'm not going to call upon the Deputy to respond. It seems to be no. Those in favour of adjourning now until 2:15? Those against? I think by the narrowest of margins, we are adjourning until 2:15. Okay.
Out of lunch.